Chapter 561. Hearing Jean Canwin's reminder, my heart stirred. I quickly urged my witchcraft energy to feel the mysterious power of the seven-star mugwort. The seven-star mugwort's energy had already mixed with my witchcraft energy. I effortlessly controlled it and tried to use the seven-star mugwort's energy to touch the black spot. I vaguely felt that the pressure that had been blocking me had loosened a little. It was as if the pressure that had been blocking me was an iceberg, and my witchcraft energy was a sharp blade. I couldn't pierce through the 1,000-year-old mysterious ice at all. Now, the seven-star mugwort's power was like a flame, burning the sharp blade of my witchcraft energy red. When I poked the 1,000-year-old mysterious ice again, the surrounding ice gradually melted, and I slowly poked it in. Feeling this, I was immediately excited. I mobilized more witchcraft energy, trying to disperse the resistance of the 1,000-year-old mysterious ice in one go. After I had increased my strength, the resistance force in the dent increased. After a while, I felt a cold and gloomy aura trying to resist it. I was shocked. If I disturbed this evil creature now, it would be difficult to deal with it. After thinking for a moment, I slowed down the speed at which I infused my witchcraft energy. At the same time, I thought quickly in my head. This evil creature's aura was terrifying. If I rashly disturbed it, it would counterattack. It would be a small matter if Jean Canwin and I were hurt, but it would be troublesome if little Wang Li was hurt. However, I couldn't keep wasting time like this. I frowned. Although I had the cultivation base of a celestial master, I still felt that the evil energy in the black spot was endless. If I kept wasting time, I would be the first to be exhausted. At that time, it wouldn't end well. Instead of wasting it fruitlessly, it was better to take a gamble and concentrate all the power of Wizard Chi. With the help of the seven-star mugwort, he might as well go all out and try to cut off the connection between the evil thing and the black spot and little Wang Li before it alarmed the evil thing. Jean Canwin had said that Zhengyi school had a way to kill and expel evil creatures. Now that I had the cultivation base of Celestial Master, I could give it a try. I took a deep breath, and the shaman energy in my body gushed out, pouring into little Wang Li's body. It formed an ink-colored giant sword that wrapped the power of the seven-star mugwort and slashed into the depths of the black speckled dent. Just as I made my move, little Wang Li's body suddenly shook and his eyes turned purple. The evil being was reacting. When I had decided to try to cut off the evil spirit, I had already made preparations. At this moment, the arrow was knocked on the bowstring and had to be released. I gritted my teeth and exerted my strength. More and more shaman energy rushed into little Wang Li's body without reservation. The huge shaman energy sword became even more terrifying. After I had gathered all the shaman energy in my body, I controlled the huge shaman energy sword and slashed at the black speckled dent. It collided with the evil spirit power that had suddenly erupted from a dent. As soon as the two forces collided, they weren't able to determine the victor, and they collided with each other. My huge shaman energy sword had gathered all the shaman energy in my body. It would have been fine if I had succeeded in the first slash, but after the collision, I didn't have any follow-up support. Conversely, the evil spirit energy within the crater seemed to be endless, and it gathered more and more. In the beginning, it was only burning with the enormous shaman energy sword, but after a short moment, it exploded out with a bang and pushed the enormous shaman energy sword out. The power of the seven-star mugwort that wrapped around the huge shaman energy sword seemed to have lost its effect at this moment. As the huge shaman energy sword retreated, little Wang Li's body began to twitch, and his eyes became more and more purple. At this critical moment, I used the astral steps and desperately triggered the shaman energy that the dead Tai Sui's body had forcibly poured into other parts of my body and continued to pour it into the huge shaman energy sword. With the follow-up support, the momentum of the huge shaman energy sword being pushed out temporarily slowed down. However, after my supporting shaman energy was slightly delayed, the evil spirit power burst out again. The huge shaman energy sword was forced to retreat, and there was no way to resist it at all. In despair, I found that the evil spirit power didn't seem to have an upper limit. When I was still in the glory of knowledge realm, it had used the power of the glory of knowledge realm to stop me. Now that I had become a heavenly master, the power that could stop me had also become at the heavenly master level. No matter how much force I used, the evil spirit power in the dent seemed to be boundless. What should I do? I was sweating all over. If I failed this time and triggered the evil spirit power to fully erupt, little Wang Li would really be consigned to eternal damnation. Zhang Qianwen seemed to see the current situation. He solemnly stared at little Wang Li, his face pale. Suddenly, he shouted at me, "Withdraw all your shaman energy and only use the power of the seven-star mugwort to resist." I was stunned, but there was no other way. After a moment of hesitation, I chose to believe in Zhang Qianwen. I gritted my teeth and instantly withdrew the shaman energy that I had sent into the dent. The strange thing was that as I withdrew my shaman energy, the evil spirit power in the dent dissipated a lot. Only a small part of it was still surging up, as if it was about to explode. However, at this moment, after losing the restraints of the shaman energy, the seven-star mugwort's power completely erupted. It turned into a silver light that flowed out of the dent and quickly flowed through little Wang Li's body, occupying 7 acupoints from head to toe. After the seven-star mugwort's power lingered on little Wang Li's acupoints, the black dent was also illuminated by the silver light. The remaining evil spirit power was like snow meeting the scorching sun, quickly melting and disappearing. After the evil spirit's power was completely dispelled, the silver light slowly dissipated and fell on the 4 walls of the black mottled dent, forming a layer of light silver film. With the formation of this film, little Wang Li's body gradually calmed down and his eyes gradually became clear. The creepy purple color from before could no longer be seen. I wiped my sweat and stood up, asking Zhang Qianwen, "Brother Zhang, how is it?" Zhang Qianwen's pale face eased a lot. He exhaled and nodded at me. "It's hard to say. Let me see." Then he reached out his hand and gently pressed his finger on little Wang Li's forehead, closing his eyes. At this time, I couldn't help much. I could only stand aside and watch in silence. At this moment, Wang Yongjun was the first to approach me. His voice carried a hint of joy as he asked me, "Mr. Zhou, does this mean that he's cured?" I can see that the color of the dent on Wang Li's body has faded a lot. Many parts of his body look the same as ordinary skin. "I'm not sure yet. We have to see what Brother Zhang says." I shook my head, but I still looked a little nervous. The dent looked a lot better, but when I used my shaman energy to fight against the evil spirit, I lost miserably. After a while, Zhang Qianwen stopped and stood up. He turned to look at us and said, "I have good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first?" The smile on Wang Yongjun's face froze. He hurriedly asked, "Why is there bad news? It looks so much better. It's really much better." Zhang Qianwen sighed. "Just now, Zhou Yi and I tried to cut off the connection between the evil spirit in the dent and little Wang Li, but we didn't succeed. We almost caused the evil spirit to break out of seclusion in advance. Fortunately, the power of the seven-star mugwort herb is extraordinary. In the end, it temporarily suppressed the evil spirit in the passage and formed a barrier. It can protect little Wang Li for at least a year." Wang Yongjun wasn't a metaphysician, so he didn't quite understand what Zhang Qianwen had said. But now that he knew that little Wang Li was safe for the time being, the worry on his face faded a little. I was puzzled and asked Zhang Qianwen, when I tried to use my shaman energy to kill it, the power of the evil spirit in the passage was completely beyond my expectations. Zhang Qianwen smiled bitterly and nodded. "I'm afraid that our previous guess was wrong. This evil spirit is too strong. Even with the cultivation of a celestial master and the help of the seven-star mugwort herb, we can't expel it." I nodded. I had also noticed that earlier. After thinking for a while, I asked him again, "What kind of cultivation do you think is needed to expel it?" Zhang Qianwen was silent for a moment before answering. "At least the cultivation of a young god celestial master Yang God, celestial master. In the metaphysics world, there were very few Yang God, celestial masters. But with my aptitude, this realm wasn't a fantasy. It was just that the power of the seven-star mugwort herb could only protect little Wang Li for a year. How could a year be enough for me to advance to a Yang God, celestial master? Let's take it one step at a time. Zhang Kanwen looked at me with my head lowered in silence. He sighed with a helpless expression. This is the best method I can think of now. Who knows, we might find another method after a year. I nodded. Zhang Kanwen was right. Now, we could only take it one step at a time. To be honest, I had no confidence in advancing to a Yang God Celestial Master within a year. Big brother Zhang, no matter what, my son can live for another year, right? Just as the two of us were depressed, Wang Kun, who had been standing quietly by the side and watching us, suddenly spoke. That's right. Zhang Kanwen was stunned for a moment before answering casually. I'm already very grateful to you. Wang Kun first bowed deeply to Zhang Kanwen, then bowed to me and said sincerely, Little Master Zhou, Master Zhang, I'm already very grateful that you're willing to do so much for my son. As he spoke, Wang Kun's eyes reddened, and he couldn't continue. He probably knew in his heart that if there was no change in this 1 year, little Wang Li's final outcome would still be the same. All parents in the world were pitiful. Watching their child walk towards death step by step with their own eyes, no one would be in a good mood. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became heavy. Looking at Wang Kun and his wife who were choking with sobs, I couldn't say anything. I smiled wryly and glanced at Zhang Kanwen. I left him here to comfort Wang Kun and walked out. I slowly paced in the corridor alone and looked blankly in front of me. I didn't feel good in my heart. No matter what, I managed to stabilize little Wang Li for a year. But in the face of a more unpredictable future, I couldn't be happy no matter what. As I walked, I subconsciously walked to the outside of the fat man's room. I paused for a moment before pushing the door open and walking in. The fat man seemed to be woken up by the sound of my entrance. He opened his eyes and struggled to turn his head. He squeezed out a smile and asked me, You killed that bastard Lu Jinyang? How is that possible? I smiled wryly and sat down by his bed. I said slowly, He's a Yang God Celestial Master. With my strength that has just entered the Celestial Master realm, it's impossible to kill him. Then, I told him what happened after the fat man fainted. The fat man nodded and looked a little down. My monster refining gourd is also in his hands? I was speechless for a moment and smiled wryly. Yes, but there's no other way. If there's a chance in the future, I'll definitely get it back for you. The fat man also knew that I was comforting him. He chuckled and didn't continue the topic. What about little Wang Li? How is he? Did you use the 7-star mugwort? No. I sighed and said, I extended his life for another year. Just extended his life for another year? The fat man repeated my words. It was obvious that he understood. Chapter 562. Little Wang Li's matter had come to an end. The final outcome wasn't much different from what Zhang Kanwen had envisioned, which was to use the 7-star mugwort to prolong Wang Li's life for 1 year. The only difference was that the Heavenly Master's true essence couldn't completely solve this problem. He had to cultivate until he reached the Yang God Heavenly Master level. As for whether I could reach the Yang God Heavenly Master level after 1 year, I didn't know what to do at that time. I didn't want to think about it, so I didn't want to think about it anymore. I focused on consolidating my cultivation base and made some talismans for emergencies. Even at the Heavenly Master level, there weren't many ways to fight. They were just true essence spells, talismans, and treasures. I was a person who cherished my life. After cultivating for so many years, I had never stopped using talismans, which were foreign objects that could be used in an instant. I made several sets of all the talismans I knew how to make. I also gave Zhang Kanwen and Fatty a few to save their lives. I kept a few for myself and put the rest in a Xiang Lu's leather bag. This time, the yellow paper and cinnabar used to draw the talismans were of the highest quality. I just mentioned it casually, and Wang Yongjun ordered his men to deliver them to me the next day. It had been a long time since I had experienced the feeling of financial distress in the secular world. When I first entered the path of cultivation, I felt pain because of 1 or 2 pieces of yellow paper. Now that I thought about it, it was so far away that I couldn't remember it clearly. Since I had nothing to do, I decided to stay in Shenzhen. I meditated and cultivated every day, watching the sun rise from the horizon in the east to the mountains in the west. Just like that, a day passed. There was an indescribable tranquility in my heart. I suddenly understood why the ancient cultivators liked to cultivate in seclusion. Without the disturbance of the secular world, they could become one with heaven and earth. It was a kind of cleansing and settling of their cultivation base and mind. At first, Wang Yongjun came to me several times and invited me to dinner. He wanted to introduce some rich people to me. After I rejected him several times, he didn't mention it again. I wasn't trying to humiliate him. Although Wang Yongjun was a mortal without any cultivation, he still settled a lot of things for me with his great influence in the mortal world. It was indeed a lot more convenient. To me, Wang Yongjun was an extremely important friend. I just didn't want and didn't need to associate with those people. Feng Shui master has always been inseparable from rich businessmen and dignitaries. This is not because Feng Shui master is greedy for money. It is really that the practice needs a lot of materials and must be supported. This is not a shameful thing. Just like ordinary people work, they all rely on their own ability to eat. If I was still in the earthly adept realm, I would have to prepare for a rainy day. Even if I was unwilling, I would have to do something like gathering wealth. However, now that I have the cultivation of a celestial adept, the wealth of the secular world has lost its meaning to me. In terms of cultivation, I do not need too many resources. What I need more is to comprehend the heavenly Tao. Therefore, if he had the time, he might as well meditate and cultivate. Adding a trace of true essence was also a good thing. I didn't know when it started, but I had a feeling that I had transcended the mortal world. Come to think of it, it was probably after I became a celestial adept. Before becoming a celestial adept, I had always regarded myself as a special, ordinary person. But now, I had a subconscious feeling that I was above everyone else. Vaguely, I no longer felt like an ordinary person. A celestial adept could fly with his body, and his Tao, energy, and true essence were boundlessly mysterious. How could he be so different from the ordinary people in the mortal world? The so-called cultivation was actually a way to advance to a higher level. Perhaps the gods and devils in the legends were actually creatures of a higher level. This is just my guess, and I can't find the answer. Perhaps in the future, when I reach a higher realm, I will know the answer to these questions. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. Since the Hungry Ghost Festival was coming in a little more than a month, I decided to go back to my hometown to worship the ancestors. I only needed to go back during the Hungry Ghost Festival. However, I hadn't been back to my hometown for some time, and I hadn't seen Fatty and Uncle Lin for a long time. It would be better for me to go back and stay in my hometown for a while. After making up my mind, I informed Fatty. These days, Fatty's life was much more interesting than mine. He and Wang Yongjun went to most of the dinner parties that I had declined. His divination skills were indeed suitable for this kind of occasion. Just a little bit of it was enough to make those rich merchants who had been fooled by swindlers prostrate themselves before him. In Fatty's own words, they were looking at him as if he was a deity. After listening to my plan, Fatty's eyes flashed with a gleam of nostalgia. He didn't want to stay in this prosperous place. He nodded and agreed. These days, I've been thinking about going back to my hometown. I didn't expect that I would mention it to you first. Cultivators could sense the heavenly path, and their thoughts were all predestined. Fatty and I had the thought of going back to our hometown. Perhaps it was a sign that something would happen after we returned to our hometown. Of course, it was just a thought. I didn't really care about it. We packed our luggage and asked Wang Kun to help us book the plane tickets. Then, we prepared to depart. But just as he was about to leave, something happened. I had a talisman on me that looked like a child scribbling. The messy lines on the talisman contained an extremely mysterious power. There wasn't much power, but it was extremely intricate. It interacted with each other to form a small magic formation. This talisman wasn't used to control the enemy. It was a sound-transmitting talisman. It was a keepsake that Wang Ken had given me. When he wanted to contact me, this talisman would shine. Then, it would turn the message Wang Ken wanted to convey into a stream of Zhen Yuan. Then, I would receive his message from that stream of Zhen Yuan. When he gave me the yellow paper, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Nowadays, electronic communication was very advanced. It was more convenient for us to leave each other's phone numbers and contact each other directly. However, Wang Ken insisted that I keep the talisman. He said that people in the blessed enclave use this kind of talisman to send messages. Moreover, the phone might not work all the time, but this talisman could be used anywhere as long as the user's true essence didn't run out. Since he was so insistent, I accepted the talisman. Anyway, it was just a piece of paper, and it didn't take up much space. I didn't expect that I would use it today. When the fatty and I were about to leave for the airport, I felt my body heat up. I felt something shiver. I took it out and found that it was the talisman. I took out the talisman, and the lines on it sparkled. Soon, it condensed into a small white bead. I recalled the method Officer Wang had taught me. I gathered a wisp of true qi at my fingertip and flicked it toward the bead. The bead paused for a moment. Then, it spun and turned into a white mist, gently falling into my hand. I held the white mist and closed my eyes. I then used my true essence to read the message in the mist. There was only one sentence on it. To the sage, Holy Spirit Guard Wang Ken pays his respects. The Wangwu Wonderland sincerely invites the sage to come and observe the heavenly grand ritual. Third baby, what did Wang Ken say? The fatty asked when he saw me close my eyes. He asked us to go to the Wangwu Wonderland. I opened my eyes and told him to participate in the heavenly grand ritual. What's that? The fatty was bewildered. He looked at me in bewilderment. It's a grand event there. Actually, I didn't know much about it. I recalled what Officer Wang had told me about the heavenly grand ritual. I tried to explain to the fatty. Officer Wang told me that there will be a competition at the heavenly grand ritual. So, it's a very important event. That should be the case. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent me a message. So, are we going back to our hometown? I was bewildered by the fatty's question. After thinking for a while, I answered, let's go to Wang Ken's place first. There are still 2 months until the Zhongyuan festival, so we're not in a hurry to go back to our hometown. I heard from Wang Ken that something troublesome was going to happen in the Wangwu Wonderland during the heavenly grand ritual. Since he sent me a message, we have to go there and check it out. The fatty had always listened to me since he was a kid. Seeing that I had made a decision, he immediately agreed. I asked Wang Yongjun to help us book new tickets. The Wangwu Wonderland was located on Mount Wangwu in Jiyuan, Henan Province. It was quite far from Shenzhen. As soon as we got on the plane, the fatty asked for a blanket, wrapped it around his body, and fell asleep. I couldn't help but smile wryly when I saw him sleeping so soundly. This fellow was still at the Earth Master realm. Before I had become a heavenly master, every time I got on a plane, I always felt flustered. I didn't know how he could adapt to the plane so well. Was it because he had a big heart and a big body? Of course, I didn't feel any discomfort now. However, I didn't sleep. Instead, I looked at the scenery outside the window and quietly comprehended. Meditating and adjusting one's breath were only a part of the heavenly master realm's cultivation. More things needed to be comprehended. Literally speaking, the word comprehended didn't mean seeing more and thinking more. Although I couldn't explain the mysteries behind it, seeing more and thinking more was always beneficial. While looking at the magnificent scenery, I thought about the Wangwu Wonderland we would go to this time. I knew a little about the Wangwu Wonderland. According to the records, Mount Wangwu was located in the northwest of Henan Province. It was connected to the Taiying Mountains in the east, the Zhongqiao Mountains in the west, the Taiwan Mountains in the north, and the Yellow River in the south. It could be said that it gathered the spiritual aura of the 4 directions. Since ancient times, it had been a famous, blessed land. The holy land of the Chuanjin sect was Mount Wangwu. Apart from that, there was another rumor that interested me. According to the legends, Mount Wangwu was the place where the Yellow Emperor of the Xianyuan clan prayed to the heavens. As one of the ancestors of the Chinese civilization, the Yellow Emperor of the ancient times would come here every year to pray for good weather and for the people's health. That was why Wangwu was also called the Temple of Heaven in ancient times. Of course, this Temple of Heaven wasn't the tourist attraction in the capital. Although they were both called the Temple of Heaven, they were thousands of miles apart. I thought about the Xinyuan sword sheath in my hands and wondered if I would encounter something related to my identity in my previous life on Wangwu Mountain. I was looking forward to it, but I was also a little scared. After getting off the plane, I didn't immediately contact Wang Li. Instead, I took the fatty to wander around Mount Wangwu. This place was the same as other famous mountains and rivers. It had many tourist attractions, such as balcony palaces and geological museums. Of course, I didn't want to go there to see them. Most of these attractions had been built by later generations, and some of them were fake. Of course, they didn't have a wisp of spiritual energy. I guess this place wasn't the Wangwu Wonderland. After wandering around for half a day, the fatty became impatient. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and complained, "Why don't you contact Wangcan? Why are you wandering around here?" I wasn't in a hurry. Ever since I had learned about the heavenly wonderlands, I was very interested in them. If I called Wangcan to guide me, I would lose a lot of fun. It would be better to explore Mount Wangwu by myself. I wanted to see where the Wangwu Wonderland was. If I could find some clues, I would have some experience in searching for other heavenly wonderlands. Chapter 563. Hearing what I said, the fatty rolled his eyes and flipped his t-shirt over, revealing his fat belly. I'm afraid that Officer Wang won't be surprised. He'll only think that there's something wrong with the two of us. After saying that, he sat on the ground and didn't want to leave. He continued to mutter, "Why is it so hot? I don't care. I want to rest." Just as he sat down, he seemed to feel uncomfortable. He turned his head and saw a rock that was as tall as a person. He jumped up and sat on the rock, fanning himself. "You're at the glorious consciousness realm, but you're so tired from climbing the mountain. Don't you feel ashamed?" I looked at the fatty, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Can't you use your Tao energy to dissipate the heat? You should try to use your Tao energy." The fatty rolled his eyes at me and said, "Ever since I came up the mountain, I felt that the Tao energy in my body was changing very slowly. It's obvious that there's some kind of restriction, but it's not to the extent that I can't use a trace of Tao energy. However, they've already set up a restriction. It's not good to go against them, right?" I was stunned. Then I activated the Tao energy in my body. Just as the fatty said, I felt a trace of resistance when I activated the Tao energy. However, with my heavenly master cultivation, the resistance was so small that it could be ignored. That's why I didn't notice it. The place where Wangwu Grotto Heaven was located should be the place with the most abundant spiritual energy in Wangwu Mountain. Not to mention anything else, there should be a true dragon's vein inside. Otherwise, the cultivation of the people inside would be a big problem. Since there was a true dragon's vein, it wouldn't be a problem to use the power of the true dragon's vein to set up a restriction that hindered the movement of Tao energy. Moreover, the restriction wasn't as simple as suppressing Tao energy. Once Tao energy was used to resist the restriction, it would definitely cause a fluctuation. Thus, the restriction also had a warning function. Just as we were talking about the restriction, a young Taoist suddenly appeared next to us. He stared at the fatty with his round eyes and looked dissatisfied. "Stand up. Who allowed you to sit there?" The fatty and I were bewildered. We lifted our heads to look. The little Taoist was around 11 or 12 years old. He had delicate features, red lips, and white teeth. He wore a cyan Taoist robe, but he didn't look like an immortal. We only felt that he was exceptionally cute. Facing such a cute little Taoist, although he was scolded, Fatty did not feel embarrassed. Instead, he teased him and asked, "Oh, then tell me, why can't I sit here?" "This is the spirit stone passed down by the ancestors of our Taoist temple. How can we allow you to tarnish it like this?" The little Taoist stretched out his hand and pointed at the rock below Fatty's buttocks. He had an indignant look on his face, as if Fatty had done something that deserved to be struck by lightning. I was bewildered and bent down to look. Sure enough, there was a small sign next to the stone. The sign looked old, and there were 4 traditional Chinese characters on it. No climbing. At this time, Fatty also saw the small wooden sign and immediately became unhappy. He shouted, "Aren't you trying to blackmail me? Who can see such a small sign?" Hearing that he was slandered as blackmail, the little Taoist was also unhappy. He pouted and said with grievance, "Normally, no one comes here. Even if someone comes, there are so many rocks beside us. Who would purposely climb up to such a high rock to sit?" He wasn't speaking nonsense. This was a rock that was as tall as a person. Even if a normal person wanted to sit on it, they might not be able to do so. Fatty was just arguing with me and purposely sat on it. Fatty was a bit embarrassed by what the little Taoist said. However, this fellow still had a child's heart, so he decided to act shamelessly. He sat on the edge of the rock and kicked his legs. He said with a smile, "Look, the wooden sign says that climbing is forbidden, but I didn't climb it. I sat on it, so it doesn't count as breaking the rule. Don't you think so?" This caused the little Taoist's morale to drop. He had probably never seen such a shameless person like Fatty. His chubby little finger pointed at Fatty. His small face was red, and he couldn't say anything for a long time. Looking at the two of them playing around, I didn't pay much attention to them. I turned around and looked around. I realized that the Fatty and I had walked to a secluded place. There was a dense forest all around us. We were walking on a small path, surrounded by mountains and forests. There were no longer any crowds like the tourist attractions we had seen before. Just a few hundred meters in front of us, there was a shabby little Taoist temple. This temple was very different from the tourist attractions from before. It looked like it hadn't been repaired for a long time. I didn't know how many tiles were missing from the roof. I really suspected that when it rained, it would rain heavily outside and drizzle inside. In an isolated place, there was a shabby little Taoist temple and this little Taoist. Interesting. I pondered for a while and thoughtfully looked at the angry little Taoist. I also felt like teasing him. I opened my mouth and asked, "Is it your Taoist temple in front of us? Why does it look so shabby? It can't be compared to the ones we saw before." The little Taoist was holding back his anger, but he didn't notice it. Hearing what I said, he immediately got angry again. He looked at me angrily and retorted loudly, "What do you know? We are the orthodox ones. Those shabby temples outside are just scamming you tourists for money. Then why is your orthodox one so shabby? The ones outside that you said are all lies." After thinking for a while, he made a fierce expression and said to me, "You can't run. If you chase us away, I'll use the Taoist spell that my master taught me to beat you up." After saying that, he suddenly covered his mouth. "That's not right. My master doesn't allow me to use Taoist spells." The little Taoist seemed to be unwilling to give up. He hesitated for a while before glaring at me. "Even if I secretly use it, master won't know. Hurry and come with me." The fat man looked at him and laughed. I smiled and nodded. "All right, if you don't use Taoist spells to beat us up, we'll go with you." The little Taoist let go of my sleeve and led the way. From time to time, he would look back as if he was afraid that we would run away. The fat man followed behind me. He frowned and whispered to me, "Third baby, we should go to Wangwu Grotto Heaven to find Officer Wang. Why are you playing with this little Taoist?" "Don't worry." I smiled and shook my head. "Did you notice anything strange about this little Taoist? A strange place?" The fat man frowned and mumbled, "Isn't he just a kid at the dragon-seeking realm?" As soon as he said that, he realized something was wrong. The fat man looked enlightened. "This kid is also a cultivator." I nodded. "This kid is around 11 or 12 years old. Don't you think it's strange that his cultivation base is close to sealing acupoints at such a young age? If that's the case, why is his sect in this kind of place?" The fat man finally put on a serious face and muttered, "Is this shabby temple fake? It looks shabby from the outside, but it's a different world inside. I heard that many Taoist sects like to play like this. Let's go in and take a look." I smiled and followed the little Taoist into the shabby temple. As soon as we entered the temple, I felt an old, rotten smell. I lifted my head and saw that the inside of the temple was shabby. It would look like it had been eaten by insects. I wondered if it would collapse in the next second. Spider webs grew between the pillars. At first glance, it didn't look like anyone had cleaned it. The little Taoist saw us looking around and blushed. However, he didn't explain much and just said, "Let's go quickly. My master is inside." At this moment, I couldn't be bothered to bicker with him. Instead, I was quite curious about the master that he was talking about. This little Taoist was at the dragon-seeking realm and had even reached the late stage close to perfection. Then his master should be a sealing acupoint expert at the very least, or even glory of consciousness. The glory of consciousness realm was considered not bad among cultivators. Disregarding the high and mighty celestial masters, the glory of consciousness realm could be said to be the backbone of the entire cultivation world. Even in a place like Celestial Master Sect in Mount Longhu, a glory of consciousness realm cultivator was enough to be a hall master. Why was he willing to teach a little Taoist in this shabby temple? If this little Taoist was really talented, then he should be allowed to enter Wangwu Wonderland to cultivate in the dragon vein. If his talent wasn't enough, then he wouldn't need a glory of consciousness expert to accompany him. Thinking that, I became more and more curious about the master that this little Taoist was talking about. Very quickly, we entered the main hall. At the very center of the main hall was a clay statue. Under the dim light, it seemed quite mysterious. Below the statue, an old Taoist sat on a praying mat, his eyes closed in meditation. "Master!" When the little Taoist saw the old man, he immediately pounced over with a face full of grievance. He loudly complained, "Master, they took our spirit stones. I told them that we are the most orthodox in the mountain, but they didn't believe me." Chapter 564. The old Taoist furrowed his eyebrows and didn't say anything. The little Taoist, on the other hand, became smug. He probably felt that he had someone to rely on with his master beside him. He puffed out his chest and said to me smugly, "Hurry up and apologize, then I'll let you leave." The little Taoist was smug, but the old Taoist's expression grew uglier. Cultivators could sense the other's aura. I only had to lift my eyes to take a look. Without even using my power of insight, I could tell that this old Taoist was at the beginner stages of glorious consciousness. The old Taoist realm was too far from mine, so he naturally couldn't see through my cultivation. I reckoned that his expression changed because of that. However, after a moment, the old Taoist's face that was as dry and rough as an old tree's bark squeezed out a smile. He didn't look at us, but extended his hand to rub the little Taoist's head and asked, "Mo, what happened?" They were sitting on the spirit stone just now. The little Taoist, named Mo, pouted and looked angrily at the fatty and me. I said that we are the orthodox sect of Wangwu Mountain that has been passed down for 1,000 years. This is the spirit stone that our master left behind, but they didn't believe me. They said that they wanted to go to those deceptive places to offer incense. "Fellow Taoists, my disciple is naughty. Please excuse me." The old Taoist smiled wryly and cupped his hands towards the fatty and me. "However, this small temple is simple and crude, so there's nothing to see. If the two of you want to offer incense and ask for the divination stick, it's better to go to the bigger temples in front." Hearing the old Taoist say that, Mo instantly pouted and said unwillingly, "Master, but they're slandering us, Mo." The old Taoist was slightly dissatisfied. He frowned and scolded softly. The little Taoist shrunk his neck and didn't dare to make another sound. "All right, please leave." The old Taoist clearly didn't want to have anything to do with us, so he ordered us to leave with an indifferent expression. I squinted my eyes. Although the old man in front of me only had the cultivation of the beginner stages of glorious consciousness, he gave me a very strange feeling. There seemed to be a huge power hidden in his body. It made me feel a little fearful. As for the mountain-suppressing spirit stone they mentioned, I didn't believe it either. There was no spiritual power in it all. Even if there was something special about it that I couldn't see, it wouldn't have been left at the door to be exposed to the elements. I had thought that the little Taoist had been deceived by his master, and that the people in this broken temple had evil intentions, using an ordinary stone to blackmail others. But now, it seemed that there was something else going on. I chuckled. Just as I was about to speak, I suddenly felt a fluctuation of Tao Qi. I turned to look at the little Taoist, Mo. The little guy pursed his lips tightly. It was obvious that he was upset about not being able to clear the name of his Taoist temple. I saw his small hands hidden in his wide sleeves. His sleeves were slightly trembling, and the Taoist Qi fluctuations were coming from them. I couldn't help but find it funny. This little fellow really wanted to teach me and the fatty a lesson. Although the old Taoist was closer, his cultivation was lower, so he was slower to notice than me. When he turned his head, it was already too late. The little Taoist's face was solemn. His small hands, which still had some baby fat, suddenly swung out from his sleeves. A crystal-clear small sword appeared out of thin air. Seeing this small sword, I was stunned. Then a wave of shock surged in my heart. This little IMO was actually a sword cultivator. Speaking of sword cultivators, I had only seen a few words in the death scripture. I knew that this was a group of cultivators unique to Huaxia. From Earth Master to Heaven Master, they only had one sword in their body. Even when they reached Yang God Celestial Master, they didn't have a humanoid Yang God like others. What replaced it was the same sword. Sword cultivators didn't rely on talismans or spells. No matter if it was cultivation or fighting, they only relied on a sword. Because it was secretive, it wasn't widely spread. After the Ming and Qing dynasties, it gradually became extinct. When a sword cultivator cultivated, they paid attention to nurturing the sword. At the beginning, their strength was weaker than other cultivators, and it was more difficult for them to grow. However, once they succeeded in nurturing the sword and became a celestial master, they would have a sword soul that was equivalent to the celestial master's seal. Only then would the power of a sword cultivator be completely released. It could be said that if they encountered a god, they would kill a god. If they encountered a Buddha, they would kill a Buddha. It was extremely fierce and terrifying. However, because sword cultivators needed to nurture the sword at the Earth Master stage, compared to other cultivators, they didn't need that much spiritual power before they reached the Celestial Master realm. That was why this little Taoist was hiding in a broken temple with ordinary spiritual energy to cultivate in Wangwu heavenly abode. While I was thinking, the old Taoist expression suddenly changed. Imo, put away the sword soul, the old Taoist shouted. There was a faint sound of metal and stone in his aged voice. He suddenly leaped up, and the old Taoist robe on his body fluttered even though there was no wind. He leaped into the air like a rock spreading its wings, blocking between me and Imo. Seeing that his master had such a strong reaction, the little Taoist shivered in fear. The small sword that was originally in the sky also shook and fell down like a headless fly. Master, I just wanted to prove that we aren't swindlers. Imo probably felt that something was wrong. With a sobbing tone, he carefully put away the transparent sword soul into his body and explained to the old Taoist in a low voice. I said before, don't use this sword technique in front of outsiders. Why didn't you listen? The old Taoist sighed. Then he glared at me and the fatty and said coldly, "To Taoists, this old man advised you to leave with good intentions. If you don't leave, then don't leave now." I smiled faintly. Sire should also be a sword cultivator, right? A sword cultivator's strength isn't bad. However, Sire is too arrogant if you want to make me stay. As expected, you recognized me. The old Taoist's gaze became even colder. His face even carried a hint of determination to die. This old man has concealed his identity in this abandoned village for over 10 years. I didn't think that I would still be found. Before he finished his sentence, an enormous aura rose from the old Taoist's body. It seemed that he was accumulating power in preparation for a fatal blow. I know that you are a strong person in the later stages of glory of memory, or even in the complete stages of glory of memory, the old Taoist said slowly. The white beard by the side of his mouth trembled. But so what? There are many souls in the later stages of glory of memory under this old man's sword. Following his words, the aura around the old Taoist grew stronger. Master, Little Amo seemed to be scared silly. He looked at his master and then at us. His eyes instantly turned red, and a few drops of tears hung at the corner of his eyes. Master, let them go. It's all Amo's fault. Imo doesn't dare to use his sword technique in front of others anymore. They already know your identity as a sword cultivator. I must kill them. The old Taoist roared again. Imo shivered in fear. After all, he was just a child. He was naive. Looking at his master, who was usually gentle, and gentle suddenly becomes so strict and terrifying. Little Imo shrunk his body. He used a mosquito-like voice to say, Master, they didn't bully Imo. Don't kill them. Okay, this little fellow was a kind and good child. His Taoist heart was pure. No wonder he had such a high cultivation at such a young age. Little fellow, don't worry. This old man can't kill us. The fat man who had been standing at the side also recognized the old Taoist cultivation. He wasn't nervous at all. He smiled at the little Taoist with a sly face. Little fellow, why don't we make a bet? We won't kill this old man later. As long as we defeat him, you'll follow us and change your master. Okay? Impudent. The old Taoist expression was as cold as ice. Hearing the fat man's words, he was even more certain that we didn't have good intentions. You really came for Imo. Even if I have to risk my life today, I won't let you succeed. With that, he shook his Taoist robe. Little Imo was carried to the back by a gentle Taoist chi. At the same time, the old Taoist opened his mouth and spat out a small science sword. The small sword grew bigger and bigger until it was the same size as a normal weapon. At the same time, the old Taoist's face turned pale, as though he had used up a lot of energy. After summoning the Taoist sword in his body, he reached out with one hand and quickly used his thumb to cut the tip of his index finger. A drop of blood flew out and landed on the blade of the small science sword. I, a sword cultivator, only have one sword in this life. No matter gods or demons, I will slay them with one sword. The old Taoist laughed bitterly. His body gave off a loud bang. It was obvious that he had used a move that would put his life on the line. Kill! The old Taoist spat out another mouthful of blood. The cyan sword trembled slightly, and its entire body turned a strange green and red color. Then, like a bolt of lightning, it dashed toward the fatty and me. Following the green and red light, the old Taoist's thunderous roar spread over. Although I'm not a heavenly master and have yet to nurture the sword, I have never shown this Taoist sword to anyone in these 10 years. Today, I will use you 2 traitors to sacrifice to the sword. Die. In an instant, the green and red sword light was about to reach my body. Although a sword cultivator wasn't ordinary, the old Taoist was only at the beginner stage of glorious memory. Even if I had nurtured the Taoist sword in my body for 10 years, it was just a normal attack to me. Just as I was about to grab the Taoist sword, the old Taoist's face suddenly turned pale. He shouted, "Explode!" The moment he said that, the sword stopped in the air and gave off a blinding light. Then, countless sword shadows wrapped around me. The moment the old Taoist attacked, he chose to fight to the death. He would rather give up the Taoist sword that he had nurtured for many years and kill my fat man with a thunderous strike. In an instant, the enormous Taoist energy that had gathered in the sword exploded. The entire small temple was covered in white light. Unfortunately, the difference in realm was too huge. It was inconvenient for me to move my hands. With just a thought, the seal in my body gathered above my head. When the white light dissipated, the old Taoist coughed as he struggled to support his body. He lifted his head and stared at the fat man and me. He seemed to be extremely confident in his Taoist sword. His furrowed brows loosened and the nervousness from before dissipated. However, when the white light dissipated and the fat man and I appeared unharmed, the old Taoist's eyes opened wide. At this moment, I felt helpless. The reason why I came to this small temple was because I was interested in the little Taoist Mo's cultivation, who knew that after the old Taoist saw me, he would treat the fat man and me as his mortal enemies. I had planned to subdue him and then explain to him, Who knew that the moment he attacked, he would use such a desperate move? He didn't give me any time to explain it all. At this moment, I was angry. I didn't retract the Heavenly Master seal, but left it 3 inches above my head. It slowly spun, and a white light covered the bottom of the seal, not revealing the words on it. Heavenly Master. Chapter 565. After one strike, the old Taoist had obviously tested my strength. His eyes were filled with despair as he stared at me and muttered to himself, "It's a Heavenly Master. It shouldn't be. Even if it's a Heavenly Master, he shouldn't be able to block my destruction sword." That old Taoist's desperate strike would have severely injured an ordinary Heavenly Master, even if he didn't die. That was the horror of a sword cultivator. However, he had met me. My cultivation base was several times that of an ordinary Heavenly Master. I cultivated both Taoism and witchcraft, and the true qi in my body was more than twice that of an ordinary Heavenly Master. Although I was still in the early stage of Seal Heavenly Master, in terms of power, I was confident that I could fight anyone below Yang's spirit. At least, my cultivation base was equivalent to the late stage of Seal Heavenly Master. Although a sword cultivator was scary, he was unlucky to have met me. Looking at the old Taoist's dispirited and desperate face, the anger in my heart dissipated. I thought about it and put away the seal, wanting to explain to him. Before I could speak, Imo jumped up from the ground and ran to the old Taoist lying on the ground, crying, Master, what's wrong?" Imo and the old Taoist obviously had a deep relationship. Tears streamed down his face as he hugged the old Taoist who had fallen on the ground, his face filled with worry. The old Taoist smiled sadly when he saw Imo. His eyes were filled with love. He reached out to rub Imo's head, and his face suddenly became solemn. He said to Imo in a low voice, "Hurry up and go out from the back door to find your Uncle Juan. I can't protect you anymore. I've already sent a message to inform your Uncle Juan. Hurry up and go. You'll be safe once you see Uncle Juan." Then, he pushed Imo behind him and struggled to stand up. He glared at me fiercely. It was obvious that he was prepared to block the fat man and me with his life so that Imo could escape successfully. I was confused by his parting. Originally, it was just a coincidence that I met Imo, and coming to this small temple was an unintentional move. Who knew that as soon as the old Taoist saw me, he wanted to die together with me? At this moment, he was certain that I had ill intentions. I didn't know how to explain myself. Seeing that the old Taoist was going to attack again, I suppressed my unhappiness and shouted coldly, "Wait! I'm just passing by. Taoist friend, is there any misunderstanding?" Misunderstanding? The old Taoist didn't listen to my explanation. He smiled miserably. Since he was gathering his power, blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth. "It's a misunderstanding. You even said you wanted to change your master. Don't think that I don't know your tricks. I protected this child for an entire 10 years so that he wouldn't be captured by you heartless fellows to be a sword slave like his parents. I never expected that he would still be found by you in the end." Sword slave? I was puzzled. I knew about sword cultivators, but what was a sword servant? It was obvious that he and little Imo had some sort of enmity. He was hiding in this rundown temple to avoid his enemies. Today, the fatty and I had unexpectedly appeared, so he thought that we were his enemies and had come to seek revenge. That was why he was acting so fiercely. With that thought, I felt relieved. This old Taoist was a pitiful man. I guessed his fear of his enemies had made him sensitive. That was why this series of misunderstandings had occurred. To prevent the misunderstanding from deepening, I hastily shook my head and solemnly told him, "Taoist friend has indeed misunderstood. I didn't come here to look for Imo, nor will I capture him. Stop pretending." The old Taoist coldly looked at me. He didn't believe me at all. He coughed violently, and blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth. He sneered and said, "The people of your Schwanda wonderland have always been hypocritical. Even at this time, you still say that you won't capture him. If you really won't capture him, why did you come to my small temple? Don't tell me that it was an accident. I purposely built this small temple in the depths of Mount Wangwu to isolate it from human habitation. Mount Wangwu is 150 kilometers away from here. Why didn't you go anywhere else but here? Do you really think that I'm a fool?" In his anger, the old Taoist seemed to have lost his mind. His eyes turned red as he glared at me. Schwanda Wonderland. It must be one of the blessed lands. The old Taoist cultivation base wasn't high, but his enemy was a Wonderland family. It was no wonder that he was so nervous. Although I was angry at him, I could only shake my head and smile bitterly. I took out a pill and threw it to him. I said, "This is a healing pill. It contains my Tao, Qi, and true essence. After you swallow it, the injuries in your body will recover." After giving him the pill, I wanted to say goodbye, but the old Taoist interrupted me. He threw the pill to the side and sneered. "It's this trick again. That year, most parents were fed with mind-controlling drugs. Because they didn't want to be enslaved, they committed suicide. Do you think that I will fall for the same trick again?" I was stunned. Little Amo, who was still standing behind the old Taoist and didn't want to leave, shivered. He pulled the old Taoist's sleeve with a pale face and asked shakily, "Master, didn't you say that my parents died in a car accident not long after I was born?" The old Taoist smiled wryly. He supported his body and hugged little Imo. His eyes were red. "I didn't dare to tell you the truth. But you have to remember that your parents died in the hands of these people. You have to train hard in the future. After you've condensed your sword spirit, you can take revenge for your parents and master." Do you remember? Hearing that, the sadness on the little Taoist's face lessened. His anger rose. He suddenly wiped his tears and broke free from the old Taoist's embrace. He didn't run away, but gritted his teeth and took out his small sword. Then he charged at me and the fatty. "I'm going to kill you." After the old Taoist destroyed his own Tao sword, he was already weak. At this moment, when Imo broke free from his grasp, it was too late for him to pull Imo back. He could only cry out, "Imo, don't." At that moment, Imo was completely immersed in his hatred. Although he was only at the dragon-seeking realm, after he took out his sword, there was an imposing aura that charged at me. What was going on? I sighed and gently raised my hand. A gentle Tao Qi and true essence appeared and blocked in front of Imo. It was as if the little Taoist had crashed into an invisible wall. He rushed forward with tears streaming down his face, but he couldn't move an inch forward. Because of his hatred, this old Taoist had become obsessed. Coincidentally, he had already determined that I was his enemy. No matter how I explained, he wouldn't believe me. Helpless, I didn't bother to explain anymore. The only thing I could do now was to leave. When the old Taoist woke up, he would naturally understand. I looked at the old Taoist and prepared to say goodbye again. However, at that moment, the old Taoist's eyes suddenly lit up. He suddenly had hope and looked behind me. I was stunned and immediately turned to look. It was Wang Qin rushing over from afar. Ah Fu and the others followed behind him. It was obvious that he had seen the situation here and was dumbfounded. "Brother Wang." The old Taoist acted as if he had grasped a life-saving straw. He screamed crazily at Wang Qin in the distance. "Brother Wang, they're here to catch Imo. Come and save Imo." As he screamed crazily, Wang Qin finally arrived. However, after glancing at the old Taoist, he respectfully walked to me and cupped his fist to greet me. "Sage." Seeing Wang Qin's behavior, the old Taoist was like a duck that had its neck pinched. His voice stopped abruptly. He looked at Wang Qin and then at me. His face was bewildered and desperate. It seemed he had regarded Wang Qin as his enemy. The old Taoist seemed to have lost his mind. I nodded at Wang Qin to return his greeting. Then I pointed at the old Taoist and said, "There's a misunderstanding. This old Taoist mistook me for someone from the Schwanda Wonderland. You should explain it to him." "Schwanda Wonderland?" Wang Qin frowned, his face unhappy. He turned to look at the old Taoist, and his voice became cold. "Huang Zhu, he's a guest I invited to the Wangwu Wonderland to attend the ceremony. He has a noble status, and he's not from the Schwanda Wonderland. Don't try to fool him." At this time, the old Taoist could no longer listen to others. He sneered and even looked at Wang Qin with a cold look in his eyes. Imo was kneeling next to the old Taoist. His face was sad and angry. He looked at us and then at the old Taoist. He didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do, so I simply waved my hand and said to Wonkin, "You find someone to deal with this. We'll talk somewhere else." Wonkin turned around and talked to the people behind him. Then, he called the fatty and I to leave the ruined temple. We went to the big rock where the fatty had sat earlier. I looked at the lush forest and pointed at the ruined temple. I asked Wonkin, "All right, tell me, what's going on with these two Taoist priests?" "Sage, it's my fault. I made a fool of myself." Wonkin forced a smile and said, "This old Taoist was a friend of my father's. He has been here for more than 10 years, but he didn't want to come to the Wangwu Wonderland. He only asked the Wang family to protect him and his disciple. He built a ruined temple in this remote mountain and lived in seclusion every day. Today, I received a message from him. He told me that his enemy had come to take revenge. That's why I came here. I didn't expect that it would be you." I nodded. "Tell me more about their identities. Also, tell me about their relationship with the Schwanda Wonderland. That old Taoist came to me more than 10 years ago." Wonkin hesitated for a moment, then said, "Sage, you know about sword cultivators, right?" I nodded, so Wonkin continued, "These two people are sword cultivators, especially the young Taoist priest named Imo. He has the best talent among sword cultivators. He's called the innate sword embryo." Innate sword embryo? I raised my eyebrows. I had never heard of such a thing before, so I couldn't help but be curious. Wonkin continued to explain, "The so-called innate sword embryo is the constitution most suitable for sword cultivators. They can condense the sword soul at the beginning of their cultivation, and their cultivation speed is amazing. As long as there are no accidents along the way, they can condense the real spirit of sword principle within 60 years. The real spirit of sword principle is equivalent to our yang spirit." Yang spirit? I was shocked. Cultivation was like a reverse journey, especially after the celestial master realm. It was extremely difficult to make any further progress. Take me for example. After I became a celestial master, I still practiced diligently every day, but the progress in my realm was extremely slow. I didn't know when I would condense the yang spirit. It was because of my excellent talent and all kinds of fortuitous encounters. If it were other cultivators at my age, I'm afraid they wouldn't even dare to think about being a celestial master. However, this young Taoist priest, Imo, would definitely become a celestial master in 60 years. His talent was really terrifying. An ordinary man's wealth would become his own ruin. With this kind of talent, it was normal for conflicts to arise. It was just like when I had revealed my talent of 4 meridians at the Young Phoenix gathering. That was why it caused so many conflicts. I sighed and thought for a moment. Then I asked Wonkin, "What's that sword slave?" Chapter 566. There were many strange things in the metaphysics world. Although I'd been cultivating for many years, there were few things that could shake my mind. However, after listening to Wang Kan's explanation of the sword slaves, my heart was still shaken, and I felt a chill run down my spine. That was a living person, a living cultivator. According to Wang Kan, the sword slaves were like corpse puppets that had been refined into magical weapons to enhance their power. Although I had the cultivation base of a heavenly master, I didn't dare to treat ordinary people like ants, let alone cultivators. However, the Schwanda Wonderland had refined cultivators into slaves that had lost their intellect, and they didn't have any respect for life. Now that I thought about it, it wasn't just the Schwanda Wonderland. In Wangwu Wonderland, there were also slaves like Afu, Alu, and Ajin. It was just that those slaves had retained their intellect. In terms of foundation, there was not much difference between the two. One was gentle, while the other was bloodthirsty. Perhaps the so-called blessed paradises and metaphysics families that had existed for thousands of years had relied on this cruel rule to survive for thousands of years and have an extraordinary status. Their power and their foundation were built on the flesh and blood of these so-called slaves. Only the fittest survived, and the world was a charaba. Under the law of the jungle, if you wanted to rise, you had to step on the heads of others. In principle, what the blessed paradises did was understandable. However, humans were humans, and they had to be different from animals that ate raw meat and drank blood. The Wanwu Wonderland's practice of providing slaves to protect their families was acceptable. However, the Schwanda Wonderland's practice of raising sword slaves had crossed the line. I sighed and thought for a while. Then I asked Wang Can, so the Schwanda Wonderland is good at making sword slaves? Yes. Like our Wanwu Wonderland, the Schwanda Wonderland doesn't have many talented people. The only thing they can rely on are the two young god sword slaves who have condensed the true spirit of the sword path. Wang Can hesitated for a while, then sighed and said, "The two sword slaves are Mo's parents." I frowned. The Taoist priest had said that Mo's parents didn't want to be enslaved, so they committed suicide. How could they still be alive? Wang Can told me that Mo's parents had committed suicide. However, the Schwanda Fairyland had been raising sword slaves for thousands of years. Their methods were very magical, and sword slaves didn't need intelligence. That was why they had preserved Mo's parents' vitality and successfully turned them into sword slaves. The old Taoist didn't know about this, but Wang Can, as the current master of the Wanwu Fairyland, knew about it. It's crazy. I sighed, feeling depressed. At this moment, I understood why the old Taoist had acted so crazily. It wasn't because of hatred, but because of fear. That year when Mo's parents were captured, he brought little Mo to escape to Wanwu Grotto Heaven. Although I don't know the details, I can imagine that it must have been a tragic matter of life and death. Even though he had been on the brink of death for many years, the old Taoist's heartstrings were still stretched taut. When he suddenly met me, the fear in his heart burst out. That was why there were so many misunderstandings. Thinking about this, the resentment I had for the old Taoist dissipated. After a moment of silence, I suddenly thought of a possibility. When I turned to look at Wang Can, my face was as dark as water. I asked him sternly, "Wang Can, tell me, do you have the intention to turn Mo into a sword slave?" As a Fairyland family, the Wanwu Fairyland wasn't having a good time. I didn't believe that Wang Can wouldn't be tempted by a young god sword slave whose fighting power was higher than that of the young god celestial master. After listening to my question, Wang Can was stunned for a moment. Then, he replied solemnly, "Absolutely not. Although the Wanwu Fairyland has declined, we don't dare to forget the teachings of our ancestors. If you want to cultivate the Tao, you must first cultivate the human nature. Only by being an upright person can you be qualified to cultivate the Tao. This is the foundation of the Wanwu Fairyland. Otherwise, when Taoist Huang Zhu took Mo to escape, he wouldn't have chosen to seek refuge in the Wanwu Fairyland. Moreover, the sword slave technique is a secret of the Schwanda Fairyland. Even if I wanted to, I didn't have a means." After listening to his explanation, I heaved a sigh of relief. The Wanwu Fairyland had a deep relationship with me. Whether it was because of my identity or because of our previous friendship, we were inseparable. If the Wanwu Fairyland was a cruel family like the Schwanda Fairyland, I really didn't know how to deal with it. After talking for a long time, the fat man couldn't help but interrupt and ask Wang Can, "What about that old man? He's also a sword cultivator, right?" I saw that his cultivation was only at the early stage of the glorious consciousness realm, but the sword he threw out made even me tremble with fear. If it weren't for Zhou Yi, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to resist that sword. Hearing the fat man's words, Wang Can frowned and said coldly, "You and I are both from a Nine Cauldron families, and we all respect the sage as our master. How dare you call the sage by his name?" The fatty and I were stunned by his sudden rage. Back in Chio's tomb, Wang Can and the fat man had a dispute because of the way they addressed each other. I stopped them, but now they quarreled again. I was a little embarrassed. I reached out and held down the fat man, who also looked unhappy, and explained to Wang Can, "I have a different relationship with him. We grew up together. My name is just a title. Don't worry too much about it. Let's talk about the question he asked." After persuading him, Wang Can let go of the question for the time being. He glanced at the fat man coldly and continued. In terms of combat power, sword cultivators are stronger than other cultivators. The old Taoist was a good friend of Mo's parents, and he already had the cultivation of the glorious consciousness realm. When he fled with Mo, he was seriously injured, and his realm fell to the early stage of the glorious consciousness realm. Now, although his cultivation has not recovered, his combat power is still far beyond the ordinary early stage of the glorious consciousness realm. It's normal that he can use that sword. It's a pity that his Taoist foundation is damaged, and he can't recover or go further. Otherwise, if he becomes a celestial master and uses a Taoist sword, I'm afraid even the sage won't be able to deal with him. After saying that, Wang Can seemed to sigh with emotion. He said, "Cultivators of my generation pay attention to two things on the road of cultivation. One is talent, and the other is resources. Both are indispensable. The old Taoist was seriously injured, and his talent was damaged. If he had enough cultivation resources, he could gradually recover over the years. It's a pity that he didn't trust the Wang family, so he didn't go to our Wangwu Grotto Heaven and use the resources there to heal his injuries. Otherwise, it wouldn't be difficult for him to recover his cultivation and even become a celestial master." His words reminded me of the time when the Liu family had destroyed my meridians, and I had used the saliva of the real dragon to dredge my meridians. The saliva of the real dragon was a cultivation resource. Wonka was right. However, when it came to the conditions of cultivation, his words were not comprehensive enough. I replied with a smile. About cultivation, the common Taoists have a saying called Dharma, wealth, companion, and place. It's quite useful. Wang Can's ancestor was also a Taoist, but he had lived in the Blessed Enclave for a long time and had been separated from the common world. He didn't understand what I meant. The fat man next to me was also a Taoist, and he had been cultivating in the common world. Seeing that Wang Can was puzzled, he answered me proudly. "You don't know this. The so-called wealth, companion, dharma, and place refers to the four elements of cultivation. Wealth refers to the treasures of heaven and earth and cultivation resources. Companion refers to not only the dual cultivation partner, but also the fellow cultivators. They can help each other to speed up their cultivation and gain more benefits. Dharma refers to the cultivation method. Only when someone preaches to you can you enter the Taoist path. Lastly, place refers to the place for cultivation. For example, your Wangwu Grotto Heaven has found a good place for cultivation, so it can maintain the speed of cultivation of your clansmen." After listening to the fat man's explanation, Wang Can's eyes flashed. He seemed to understand something. He frowned and thought about something. All right, let's go to your Wangwu Grotto Heaven." After the fat man finished showing off, he seemed a little tired. He yawned and said impatiently, "Your blessed enclave doesn't dare to show up. Not only do you want to hide, but you also want to set up some kind of restriction formation. I had to climb the mountain for a whole day. Now that you're here, you should take us in." This guy was probably really tired. He was still chattering away at this time. Wonka ignored him. His eyes were full of disdain. After glaring at the fat man, he turned to me and asked for my opinion. I gave a wry smile. I didn't know why the two of them had turned against each other. They didn't like each other, and they didn't treat each other well. I forced a smile and nodded. "Lead the way. I also want to see what the paradise looks like." Wonka nodded and smiled. He pointed to the front and said to me respectfully, "Sage, this way, please." Before leaving, I turned to look at the dilapidated temple. The dilapidated temple stood alone in the lush forest. At this time, the sun was setting, and its afterglow shone on the bricks and tiles of the temple, reflecting a warm orange light. However, I couldn't feel any warmth in my heart. I didn't know if it was because of Mo's miserable life, or if it was because of the cruel and gloomy metaphysics world, which had been torn off its bright and clean surface, which made me feel a little sad. Indistinctly, Mo's cries could be heard from the small temple. That old Taoist had saved him from the evil people of Xuanda Grotto and brought him up. It had been more than 10 years since then. Thinking about it, to little Mo, this old Taoist was the closest and most respected person in the world. Now that the old Taoist was injured, he couldn't help but feel sad. I couldn't bear to look at him anymore. I turned around and was about to leave. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of the boulder standing next to the dilapidated temple. Everything that had happened today was because of this boulder. I pointed at the boulder and asked Wang Qian, I heard from IMO that this is a spirit stone. Do you know what's so mysterious about this boulder? This boulder? Wang Qian looked puzzled when he heard my question. He answered, this boulder. I remember that year, the old Taoist came here and begged the Wanwu Grotto Heaven to take IMO in. My father's heart softened and he agreed. He left IMO, who was still a baby at that time, with me and left on his own. More than a month later, he came back with this boulder covered in blood. At that time, I wondered how he had done it. As for its mysteriousness, I had never heard of it. Wang Qian's words made me more puzzled. According to him, this boulder was very important. Otherwise, the old Taoist wouldn't have risked his life to bring it here. However, the old Taoist had only reached the peak of the glorious knowledge realm at that time. Since he had taken it back from the Xuanda Grotto Heaven, it couldn't be too precious. Moreover, everything had its owner. Even if this boulder was mysterious, it belonged to the old Taoist and IMO. It didn't have much to do with me. Chapter 567. From the time I fought with the Taoist priest to the time Officer Wang hurried over, it had been less than 15 minutes. That was why I thought that this place was very close to Wangwu Grotto Heaven. Unexpectedly, after half an hour, Officer Wang still didn't stop. Among us, the fat man had the lowest cultivation base. Moreover, he was tired, so he couldn't help but ask Officer Wang, how long will it take for us to get there? Officer Wang pointed at the top of a mountain in front of us and said, climb that mountain, and we'll be there soon. The fat man and I looked up. The mountain wasn't far from us, but there were lush trees and no traces of buildings. It didn't look like a place where people lived. Moreover, that mountain was the same place where the fat man and I had come from. It seemed that we had passed that place, but we hadn't found any traces of human habitation. I guess the fat man was angry because of the way I had addressed him. He shouted, we just passed that place. There's nothing there. Don't fool us. Officer Wang knew where Wanwu Grotto Heaven was. The fat man's words sounded like he was trying to pick a fight with us. I glared at him and tried to smooth things over. Fatty, you're right. We've searched everywhere, but we didn't find the place. I suppose there's a concealing formation at the entrance of your Wanwu Grotto Heaven, right? Officer Wang didn't even look at the fat man. When he turned to look at me, he wore a warm smile and said softly, the sage is right. The entrance of Wanwu Grotto Heaven is very mysterious. It's on this mountain, but it's not. Kid, what kind of riddle are you talking about? The fat man was a little annoyed. He squinted at Officer Wang and said in a harsh tone, if it's not on this mountain, why did you lead us for so long? I'm so tired that I've lost a few pounds of fat. The fat man didn't want to give up. I glared at him and scolded, look at your fat body. It's a good thing that you've lost a few pounds. Don't talk. Listen to Officer Wang's introduction. I was close to the fat man, so he didn't get angry when I scolded him. He just shut his mouth resentfully. Officer Wang shot him a cold look and then said, Wanwu Grotto Heaven covers a large area, and it covers 4 mountains around it. I said on this mountain because those 4 peaks indeed belong to a single peak of Mount Wanwu. The reason I said it's not on the mountain is because the 4 peaks of Wanwu Grotto Heaven are completely concealed by the formation. If you stand outside, you won't be able to see any trace of it. Wanwu Grotto Heaven actually occupied 4 mountain peaks. A mountain might not sound big, but in fact, those who had climbed mountains knew that ordinary people might not be able to climb a mountain in an entire day. It was normal for a mountain peak to be built with thousands of people living in it. One mountain peak was already like this, but Wanwu Grotto Heaven actually occupied 4. What shocked me the most was that the 4 mountain peaks were completely covered by a formation. The ancestor of the Wang family, who opened up the Wanwu Grotto Heaven, was quite generous. Such a terrifying move could only be done by someone with great cultivation. I searched around, but didn't find a location of Wanwu Heavenly Abode. While I was astonished, the fatty wasn't convinced. He's a member of the Zhanyan sect and has a profound attainment in formations. Back when we were at the foot of Mount Longhu, he helped me and Yi Piampian defeat the Taoist priests of Mount Longhu led by Chen Yanting. When he heard Officer Wang talk about formations, he thought for a moment and then sneered. If there's really a formation covering the 4 peaks, not to mention how high the cultivation of the person who set it up must be, the coverage of the formation must be very wide. But we've been walking for a long time today, but I haven't seen any trace of the formation. Don't try to fool us. Officer Wang turned to look at the fatty and spat out 2 words coldly. Ignorant. The fatty was angry. Officer Wang, I'm not as good as you in terms of cultivation, but don't try to fool me in terms of formations. Officer Wang interrupted him rudely. The mountain guarding formation of Wanwu Grotto Heaven was set up by the ancestor of the Wang family. It's normal that you can't find any trace of the formation. If you could find any trace of it, our Wang family wouldn't have been able to survive for thousands of years. I frowned. The ancestor of the Wang family, Wang Jun of Xiqing City, was the teacher of Mao Ying, the founder of the Shanqing sect. It was said that he was an immortal who had become an immortal. If he had set up a formation, it was normal that the fatty couldn't see any trace of it. Officer Wang's words made sense. However, his attitude made me a little uncomfortable. Both of them were my close friends, and my friendship with the fatty was much closer than Officer Wang's. It seemed they still wanted to argue. I coldly glanced at Officer Wang and interrupted him. We'll know the truth after we go there. Officer Wang, lead the way. Officer Wang seemed to hear the displeasure in my words. He didn't dare to argue with the fatty anymore. He even cupped his hands to apologize to the fatty. Then he led the way. I followed him and couldn't help but feel puzzled. Judging from their argument, it was clear that Officer Wang was in the right. However, because of what I said, he took the initiative to apologize to the fatty. His attitude was as if he had recognized himself as a servant. This was the Wang family that had existed for 2,000 years and ranked first among the 10 heavenly paradises. Whether it was Wang Can's identity as a sage, the 9 Cauldrons clan, or my previous life, they were all ancient things. I really didn't know what had happened thousands of years ago to make the Wang family so obedient to me and not change their original intention. While I was thinking about these questions, Officer Wang stopped and turned to me with a smile. Sage, we're here. I stopped and looked up. This was the peak that Officer Wang had pointed at. However, we were surrounded by jungle, and I could vaguely hear the chirping of birds and insects. This place was even more remote than the dilapidated temple. Except for the animal path under my feet, I couldn't see any traces of living beings. The fatty also looked around. Apparently, he wanted to find the traces of the formation. However, after a while, he couldn't find anything. He couldn't help but ask, "There's nothing here. Where's the entrance you mentioned? Is it in the trees ahead?" Officer Wang didn't dare to argue with the fatty anymore. He simply ignored him and said to me respectfully, "I'm going to activate the formation. You might feel uncomfortable when you enter it for the first time. Sage, please pay attention." Uncomfortable? I didn't mind it and nodded at Officer Wang. Although I didn't know much about formations with my current cultivation base, even if I felt uncomfortable, it would be very slight. After notifying me, Officer Wang slowly raised his hands, and a mass of green light gushed out of his palms, instantly covering the 3 of us. As the green light hovered, the surrounding scenery disappeared. Vaguely, I saw a white light shoot out from the trees ahead, echoing with the rotating green light. When the 2 gradually merged into one, I felt a white light burst out of my body. Then, 7-colored light flashed back and forth, and there was nothing under my feet. This feeling of weightlessness only lasted for a moment. Then, the 7-colored light faded away, and I was back on solid ground. When I opened my eyes again, I found that the surroundings had changed. It was a Taoist hall, which was simple and didn't have many decorations. It wasn't as luxurious as the royal palace, but its grandeur wasn't inferior to the royal palace. Besides the hall, the first thing I felt was the rich spiritual energy blowing in my face. The spiritual qi in this place was so abundant that the Taoist qi in my body circulated much faster than usual. I felt so comfortable and relaxed, like a fish returning to the water and getting rid of its shackles. Is this the blessed enclave? It's really extraordinary. At this moment, there were several cultivators in gray robes standing next to the hall. From the fluctuations of their Taoist energy, I could tell that they were all heavenly masters. Among them were the 5 elders of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth that I had met before, as well as a few others that I hadn't seen before. Officer Wong took the first step forward and stood side by side with the heavenly masters. He knelt on one knee and cupped his hands at me. Officer Wong and the Holy Spirit Guard welcomed the sage to Wangwu Grotto Heaven. This wasn't the first time that Officer Wong and the others had saluted me. I still felt uncomfortable, but I didn't refuse them this time. I calmed myself down, cleared my throat, and said indifferently, "Get up. There's no need to be so polite." "Yes." Officer Wong nodded and then stood up. The other heavenly masters in gray robes also stood up and stood behind Officer Wong with their hands clasped behind their backs. The 5 elders of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were all here, and Fu was with Officer Wong. However, Alu, Asho, and the others weren't here. I asked Officer Wong, "Where are Alu, Ashi, and the others?" They were seriously injured in Chiyo's tomb. "How are they now?" "Their injuries have healed, and they are entertaining other guests. If the sage wants to see them, I can summon them here," Officer Wong said with a smile. I shook my head. Officer Wong had summoned me to attend the heavenly grand ritual. Of course, other guests would come to watch the ceremony. There were many things to do, so I didn't want to add to his troubles. After walking out of the hall, I saw a wide stone staircase in front of me. The stone staircase extended to a very far distance. I found that the hall was built on a very high mountain peak, and there were clouds and mist hovering under our feet. After walking down the stone staircase for a short distance, we passed through the clouds. While I looked down, I saw that there was still a long way to go. I was surprised. Mount Wangwu wasn't famous for its precipitous cliffs, but in this heavenly paradise, there were such magnificent buildings. They weren't inferior to those steep mountains. Officer Wong seemed to see my surprise. He smiled and explained to me, "This stone staircase is called the Heavenly Staircase. It's the most dangerous place in our Wangwu paradise. Sage, please come over here." While talking, he pointed at a cliff on the left. I lifted my head to look. There was a pavilion there. It had an ancient style, and it contrasted well with the surrounding scenery. It was extremely beautiful. I nodded my head and lifted my foot to walk over. This platform is called the Immortals Viewing Platform. Standing here, you can see the whole picture of our Wangwu paradise. Officer Wong smiled and continued to talk to me. "Sage, take a look." I looked in the direction he was pointing. Sure enough, when I stood there, I could see the surrounding mountains and peaks. After looking at it for a while, I felt refreshed. When I was about to look away, I found that something was wrong. My face changed, and I took a deep breath. Officer Wong saw my expression and smiled. He said, "Sage, you must have seen the Wong family's true dragon veins." After a while, I slowly exhaled. The shock of my eyes hadn't disappeared. I turned to look at Officer Wong and asked with uncertainty, "Are there 4 true dragon veins here?" The value of the true dragon veins was indescribable. In the secular world, the powerful metaphysics society only had 1 true dragon vein. Even Mount Longhu, which controlled all the Taoist sects in the world, only had 3 true dragon veins. But this Wangwu paradise had 4. It was worthy of being called the world's #1 paradise. I wasn't the only one who was shocked. The fat man next to me also forgot to quarrel with Officer Wong. He opened his eyes wide and gulped. He asked me doubtfully, "Third baby, am I seeing things? Are they true dragon veins?" Chapter 568. There were 4 true dragon veins. After figuring this out, the fat man screamed, "Since when did the dragon veins become so worthless? How could it be possible to have 4 of them?" Wang could still ignore him and answer me with a smile. Sage, you have good eyesight. The 4 peaks of Wangwu Grotto Heaven were formed by the 4 dragon veins that our ancestors collected. For thousands of years, they have been the top of the 10 great grotto heavens. That's why. He was right. Just these 4 true dragon veins were enough to support Wangwu Grotto Heaven to stand firm in the world for thousands of years. The only thing that puzzled me was that the Wang family cultivated witchcraft qi. Although the 4 true dragon veins were rare, they could only absorb Taoist qi from them, not witchcraft qi. Since the true dragon veins were transformed from the Tai Sui's corpse, there should be something mysterious about the 4 true dragon veins of the Wang family. I didn't ask further and followed Wang Can. The heavenly stairway was surrounded by lush mountains and forests. I could vaguely see pavilions and cranes flying back and forth. It was as if I had arrived in a fairyland. After climbing the heavenly stairway, Wang Can took me to a Taoist palace. The Taoist palace was built on a lake. It had only 2 floors, and the decoration was simple but exquisite. The most amazing thing was that it was in the middle of the 4 dragon veins. When I looked up, I saw a stream flowing out of each of the 4 dragon veins. There seemed to be an underground spring under the stream, so the water didn't flow down. Instead, it flowed upstream and converged into a lake in the middle. This Taoist palace is where the ancestors of the Wang family cultivated. Wang Can pointed at it and gave me a brief introduction. Then, he said respectfully, Sage, you must be tired after such a long journey. You might as well take a rest here. Tomorrow, if you're interested, I will take you to see the other sceneries in the Grotto Heaven. I had to admit that Wang Can had arranged everything very well. He even used the Wang family's ancestors' cultivation place as a place for me to stay. I was flattered by his kindness. After I nodded, Officer Wang left with his people. Before leaving, he told me that if I needed anything, I could use the sound-transmitting talisman he had given me to contact him. After Officer Wang left, the fat man was still amazed. He pointed at the lake under the Taoist palace and asked me, "Third baby, if I'm not mistaken, this lake is formed by the spiritual energy of the 4 true dragon veins, right? Isn't the Wang clan a little too shocking?" "That's right." I nodded with a bitter smile. From a strength that the Wang family had displayed earlier, as well as their reputation as the head of the 10 great paradises, I already knew that they were extraordinary. However, even so, I did not dare to imagine that the Wang family's foundation was actually this terrifying. The spiritual energy in the lake in front of me was extremely rich, and even the color of the water was dark green. From a distance, it looked like a huge emerald. Although I had some unpleasantness with Officer Wang, the fat man was heartless and had already forgotten about it. With a cheerful face, he walked toward the Taoist palace. As he walked, he said excitedly, "The spiritual energy here is so rich. If I cultivate here for 2 days, my cultivation will definitely increase a lot. Maybe I can also break through to the celestial master realm." His plan was good, but I didn't think so. I shook my head and said, "If you meditate and cultivate by the lake, it will be possible. However, in the Taoist palace, it is impossible for your cultivation to increase." After hearing that, the fat man asked me doubtfully, "That's impossible. The spiritual energy in the lake is so rich, and the Taoist palace was built on the lake on purpose. Moreover, it is the place where the Wang family's ancestor cultivated. The Taoist qi here should be even richer. Why can't my cultivation increase?" I smiled and didn't answer him. I just told him to enter the Taoist palace and feel it for a while. At this time, the 2 of us had reached the entrance of the Taoist palace. The fat man took 2 steps forward and entered the Taoist palace first. As soon as he entered, his face changed. He turned to look at me with a strange face and asked in surprise, "You're right." When I stood at the entrance, I felt that the Taoist qi was extremely rich. How come there was no Taoist qi when I entered the door? How could this be? I followed him in. After sensing for a while, I confirmed my guess and explained to the fat man. The Wang family is one of the 9 cauldrons, and they cultivate sorcery qi. If there is only the Taoist qi formed by the true dragon vein here, then the Wang family's ancestor couldn't cultivate. Although I don't know what method the Wang family used, the huge amount of true dragon qi in the lake has been restored to the original sorcery qi in the Taoist palace. As I explained to the fat man, I was also shocked. The true dragon vein was formed by the Tai Sui's corpse, so it was very common for sorcery qi to be converted to Taoist qi. However, until now, it was the first time that I had seen someone restore Taoist qi to sorcery qi. The Wang family's method was really shocking. In fact, I was only guessing until I entered the Taoist palace and sensed the aura of sorcery qi. Apart from the Tai Sui's corpse, there was no other place where sorcery qi existed in the world. Hence, I couldn't cultivate sorcery qi on my own for a long time. This was the first time I had sensed sorcery qi from a non-Tai Sui corpse in this Taoist palace. Not only that, but the density of the sorcery qi here was even higher than what I'd sensed from Shaojin. Back in the Corpsine sect, the dying Tai Sui had infused me with sorcery qi. I had basically digested all of it, so I could use this opportunity to absorb it properly. Although the fat man's family was also a descendant of the Nine Cauldrons, it had ended in his father's generation. Lin Aching cultivated sorcery qi, while the fat man cultivated orthodox Taoist techniques. It was still within the scope of Taoist qi, so it was normal that he couldn't understand the profoundness of it. After listening to my explanation, he finally understood. He didn't know the subtle differences in the transformation of witchcraft, so he wasn't surprised or went out to cultivate. Instead, he casually pulled a chair over and sat on it. This guy was probably exhausted today. After sitting down, he complained, "It's like living in ancient times. Even the chairs are made of wood. It's not comfortable to sit on. The Wang family has such a big family business, but they don't know how to enjoy themselves." I also sat down beside him and touched the chair under me. I smiled at the fat man and said, "This chair is also a good thing." "Good thing?" The fat man snorted and said disdainfully, "Even if it's a precious antique, it's useless if it's uncomfortable to sit on. Try to circulate your Tao Qi now," I said to the fat man with a smile. The fat man looked at me suspiciously, then closed his eyes and circulated his Tao Qi. After a while, the fat man suddenly opened his eyes and looked at me in disbelief. "Did you feel it?" I smiled and continued, "Stand up and try again." The fatty still had that expression of disbelief on his face. He stood up and deliberately took a few more steps away from the chair. Only then did he circulate his Tao Qi again. After opening his eyes again, the fat man shakily walked to the front of the chair and gently touched the back of the chair. "This chair can increase the speed of the Tao Qi circulation." "That's right." I nodded and had the same expression. "The wood used to make this chair is called xianin wood. It's not a simple one." "Xianin wood?" The fat man frowned and thought for a while. Then he shook his head. "I've never heard of it. However, from the name, it's obviously some kind of wood with densing energy. Logically speaking, it shouldn't have the effect of increasing the speed of the Tao Qi circulation." "Xianin wood. You only said the word yin." I explained to the fat man. This xianin wood does grow in a place with extreme yin energy. However, when it was growing, it wasn't called xianin wood, but extreme yin wood. To ghosts or cultivators that cultivate yin energy, extreme yin wood is a priceless treasure. However, to other people, it doesn't have any special effect. It's just an ordinary item. How did it become xianin wood? Heavenly lightning. I pointed at the sky and adjusted my posture to make myself comfortable as I leaned against the back of the chair. To be exact, on the double yang day, the rare autumn lightning strikes the extreme yin wood. The wood that was forcefully chopped off from the book became the xianin wood. The double yang day is the day when the yang energy is the strongest. In addition, the heavenly lightning dispels evil. After being cleansed, the yin and yang energy in the xian yin wood blends together. With the mutual effects, it has the effect of increasing the cultivation speed of any cultivator. Chapter 569. I sighed and pointed at the vase on the table. Let's not talk about the chair. This vase also has a long history. The fat man had learned his lesson this time. He carefully picked up the vase and shook it. Then he asked, "What kind of treasure is this?" "Eh, it looks like a magic tool." He found a clue. He gathered his Tao energy from his fingertip and slowly poured it into the vase. After a long time, the vase didn't have any reaction. Those below the heavenly master level can't activate this magic tool. "Give it to me." I took the vase from the fat man's hand and played with it. This vase was made of porcelain. Its entire body was overflowing with light. At first glance, I knew it wasn't an ordinary item. The white base of the vase was painted with green and red colors. Ancient trees with twisted roots were drawn. It was easy to see that the person who painted this vase was very skilled. The ancient trees gathered on the vase looked like a living forest. "Didn't you want to show me? Why are you admiring it?" The fat man urged when he saw that I didn't respond. "I can't do it here. I have to go out and show you." I held the neck of the vase with one hand and supported it with the other as I walked out of the building. I left the stone path outside the building and chose a relatively wide lawn. I turned around and looked at the fat man. "Watch carefully." Then I circulated the true essence in my body and slowly poured it into the vase. The moment my Zhen Yuan came into contact with the bottle, the green and red ancient trees on the bottle suddenly lit up. As I poured more and more Zhen Yuan into the bottle, I could even faintly feel the existence of the ancient trees. I had seen this kind of porcelain vase in Taoist scriptures. It was called the Yin Yang Rui vase. The so-called Yin Yang Rui vase was to seal something that was about to die inside the vase. In the future, the sealed thing could be summoned out through a spell. This kind of act of stealing the sky and changing the sun actually disturbed the yin and yang. It forcefully kept the dying thing inside the vase. That was why it was called the Yin Yang Rui vase. Although this thing was rare, it was not very precious. This was because most of the Yin Yang Rui vases could only contain some flowers and plants. Those that could contain birds and beasts were already of a very high grade. As for those that could contain people, whether they were ordinary people or cultivators, it was a quality that could only be encountered by chance. Since ancient times, there were not many that could do so. According to the Taoist scripture I've read, there have been 2 confirmed cases in history. One of them was an ancient emperor who couldn't accept the fact that his concubine was dying of a serious illness. He found a cultivator to make a Yin and Yang Rui vase and sealed his beloved concubine's soul and body in the vase. The other one was vague, only saying that there was an evil being that could not be completely destroyed sealed within. As for the one in my hand, according to the patterns on the vase, there are only some ancient trees sealed inside, so it's not that rare. However, I was still excited. This was the first time I'd seen this kind of Yin Yang Rui vase. As the true essence slowly poured into the vase, I saw the ancient tree on the vase become brighter and brighter, as if it had gained some vitality. When I felt that the time was right, my mind flickered. I controlled my Tao energy and gathered it on one of the crooked trees. The patterns on the tree shone brightly. After the light faded, the ancient tree I had chosen began to move. Its branches and leaves shivered as if they were swaying in the wind. Then, I didn't know what to do. I carefully controlled my Tao energy and circulated it around the ancient tree, trying to summon it. Unexpectedly, the ancient tree just shivered. No matter how hard I tried, it didn't react. After a long time, I was a little impatient. I transferred my true essence and changed it to another tree. This time, it was different from the previous time. The ancient tree looked very thick. When it came in contact with my true essence, it also emitted light. Then, the light slowly gathered at the mouth of the vase. I could feel the Tao energy and true essence in the vase moving together with the light toward the mouth of the vase. Not long after that, I heard a clattering sound. It seemed something had fallen into the vase. What's going on? I was bewildered. This was different from what the Taoist scriptures had said. It should have directly summoned an ancient tree. How could this be? Third baby, you've been dawdling for a long time. What did you get? The fat man saw me standing there in a daze, so he craned his neck to look at me. I held the bottle and gently tipped it out. A green seed rolled out of the bottle. Logically speaking, it should have summoned the ancient tree. I looked at the vase. The thick ancient tree had disappeared. I explained to the fat man, but I don't know why it became this thing. The fat man saw that it was just a seed, so he lost interest. I was also a little dispirited. I put the seed in my pocket and walked back with the vase. However, what I didn't notice was that on the side of the crooked tree pattern that I had poured my true essence into for the first time, a vague figure suddenly appeared. This figure was colorful and looked like a woman. It seemed to be able to move. She carefully hid behind a tree and glanced outside. Then, she disappeared. After studying the ancient vase, the fat man lost interest. He went to the lake outside to meditate and cultivate. I also returned to the Taoist palace. Seizing this rare opportunity, I tried my best to absorb the surrounding witchcraft energy. After cultivating for a few days, I opened my eyes. It was already evening, and the sun was hanging on the horizon. I heard some noises outside. I got up and pushed the door open. A golden ray of sunlight shone into the small building, illuminating the hall. In the twilight, I saw a crane as tall as a human. It stood on the table with its slender neck and was combing the feathers on its back. I was surprised by the crane's posture. It was elegant and white, just like a fairy from heaven. The crane seemed to feel my gaze. It looked at me like a human and stopped combing its feathers. I hesitated for a while, then tried to approach it. The crane wasn't afraid of people. It just stood there and looked at me. When I came close, it stretched its head and rubbed my arm. This crane was completely different from the cranes in the mortal world. It looked elegant and full of spirit energy. It looked like a celestial spirit bird that I had seen in movies. I wondered how the Wong family had trained such a creature. I was excited to see it, so I curiously stroked its soft, fluffy feathers. Unexpectedly, as soon as I touched it, the crane shook its feathers and spread its wings. A feather fell from its armpit. The feather fluttered even though there was no wind, slowly falling in front of me. I reached out to catch the feather. The moment my fingers touched it, a weak flow of true qi was transmitted to me. I prepared a banquet. We're waiting for the sage's arrival. Follow the crane. It was Wong Can's familiar voice again. I squeezed the feather in my hand and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This fellow always made things complicated. He had sent me a sound-transmitting talisman, and now he had sent a crane to show me the way. Looking at the cranes flapping their wings and blinking at me, I thought for a while and understood. Wong had grown up in this blessed enclave. These Taoist techniques that I found a little strange were something he had been used to since he was a child. After all, the blessed heavenly abode was isolated from the rest of the world. No matter how they talked or behaved, they all looked ancient. I guess it had been like this for thousands of years. The crane was very intelligent. Seeing that I hadn't moved for a long time, it seemed to be impatient. It flapped its wings and urged me to move faster. I went out and asked the fatty to go with me. However, the fatty seemed to be immersed in his cultivation and directly refused me. I didn't force him and went out on my own. When the crane saw me go out, it flapped its wings and flew up. At first, it hovered in the air. When it flew out of the small building, it spread its wings and soared into the sky, circling above my head to show me the way. Seeing this, I couldn't help but remember the crane pendant I had used to bless Lu Qingji. At that time, after I had poured my Taoist energy into the pendant, the crane had spread its wings and led the way for Lu Qingji. Who would have thought that today I would actually see a real immortal crane leading the way for me, leading me forward? I liked this spiritual crane very much, and it reminded me of the Qilin in Chiyo's tomb. When I had first entered the Green Mountains Kingdom, I had asked the Qilin to stay in the Devil Refining Gourd to cultivate. After that, I had traveled all the way. When I returned to Shenzhen, I met Lu Jinyang. When he took the Devil Refining Gourd away, I didn't have time to release the Qilin. I didn't know how it was now. Lu Jinyang didn't know how to use the Devil Refining Gourd, so the Qilin should be safe in there. Although the Qilin, which looked like a big dog, didn't have much power and didn't have a good temper, its intelligence wasn't worse than the crane's. I followed the crane and walked down the mountain. Slowly, the road in front of me became wider and wider. In the end, it became a bluestone road, and the terrain gradually became flat. I knew we were going down the mountain. Looking back, I saw that the mountain ridge behind me was hidden in the clouds, and I couldn't see the Taoist palace where I had lived. I continued to walk along the bluestone road. There were still lush trees on both sides of the road. I didn't see any buildings or people. There shouldn't be many people living in the Wangwu Grotto heaven, and they were scattered across the mountains. It was normal to have such a sparse population. After walking for a long time, I vaguely saw a hall in front of me. Although it was exquisite, it wasn't as magnificent as the one I had seen when I had first entered the Grotto heaven. Chapter 570. As soon as I entered the hall, a young man in a white robe came to greet me. He bowed to me and said respectfully, "Sage, this way, please." I had already gotten used to hearing Wang can call me Sage, but I didn't recognize this young man. Hearing him call me Sage, I felt a little awkward, but I didn't say anything. I just nodded and followed him into the hall. There were many winding corridors in the hall. It was like a labyrinth with hundreds of twists and turns. It was very complicated. If I had come here alone, I would have been confused. It was no wonder that Wang had left someone here to guide me. There was no scenery in the hall. I looked at the young man who was leading the way. He seemed to be in his 20s, but he had the glorious knowledge cultivation base. I couldn't help but feel surprised. The glorious knowledge cultivation base wasn't low. In Longhu Mountain, it was enough to be a hall master. Apart from the heavenly masters who rarely showed up, the glorious knowledge cultivation base was considered the backbone of the metaphysics world. Moreover, this young man should be a rare genius in the metaphysics world. I was curious, so I asked, "What's your name?" The young man in the white robe turned his head. His face was still respectful as he answered in a low voice, "My name is Chun Nung." Such a talented young man was just a servant of the Wang family. I couldn't help but sigh at the profound heritage of the blessed enclave. However, after thinking about it, even a young god celestial master like Ah Fu was just a servant of the Wang family. This young man was nothing. I nodded and didn't say anything. I motioned for him to continue leading the way. After walking for a few minutes, I saw a hall in front of me. Chenung walked to the door and bowed, indicating that I had arrived. As soon as I entered the hall, Wang came to greet me. He greeted me with a smile and said, "The banquet has begun. Sage, you finally arrived." "The banquet has begun? Have the guests from the other blessed enclaves arrived?" I asked. Before coming here, Wang had told me that we were going to participate in the heavenly grand ritual and that the guests from the other blessed enclaves would come. Wang nodded and said, "The heavenly grand ritual will begin in 3 days. The blessed enclaves are scattered all over the place. Half a month ago, people arrived one after another. I've been taking care of guests for the past few days, so I'm really busy. Otherwise, I would have personally welcomed you just now." I shook my head. "If you have something to do, then do it. There's no need for me to participate in this banquet. Apart from you, I don't know anyone else in the blessed enclave." When Wang heard that, he said, "How can we do that? My Wang family is only the Holy Spirit guard of the sage. You can represent the Wang family more. During the heavenly grand ritual, I will announce your identity. From now on, the people of the blessed paradise will treat you as the Wang family's patriarch. Sage, you must attend this banquet." I was bewildered. After thinking for a while, I denied Wang Can's words. "It's better not to introduce me to them. I have disputes with many forces in the metaphysics world outside. Although the blessed enclave is hidden from the world, it is also inextricably linked to the metaphysics world. I don't want to implicate the Wangwu Grotto heaven because of me." After hearing my words, Wang was a little confused. He didn't seem to agree with me. So he said, "The mortal world is connected to the blessed enclave, but why should we care about them? To the blessed enclave, the mortal world is like a cultivator to an ordinary person. Sage, you're overthinking things." He didn't care about the mortal world and always felt that he was superior. However, I knew that there were existences in the mortal world that they couldn't afford to provoke. For example, the current heavenly master of Mount Longhu and the patriarch of the Metaphysics Society. So, I shook my head and insisted on my opinion. When Wonkin saw that I had made up my mind, he nodded and agreed. Then, he asked me, how should I introduce myself to the outsiders? After a brief discussion, we decided that I would be the Wong family's foreign minister. If I were the Wong family's foreign minister, I wouldn't need to attend today's banquet. However, Wonkin insisted that I go. I also wanted to see what was so special about the other blessed enclaves. So, I decided to attend the banquet. After making the decision, Wong Can and I walked into the hall together. After a few steps, I was stunned. I raised my head and looked at the corridor in front of me. On both sides of the corridor stood a row of young girls in palace dresses. They were holding lotus lanterns in their hands, which were the source of light in the hall. I was surprised by the number of maids and their motionless postures. However, when I took a closer look, I found that those girls weren't real people but stone statues. However, they were very lifelike, and their skin color was no different from that of ordinary people. They were also wearing silk palace dresses. At first glance, they could be mistaken for real. When Wonkin saw that I had noticed those statues, he smiled and said, "Sage, the banquet is in front of us. Dozens of people from the blessed enclave have arrived and are waiting there." I waved my hand. "If you want to hide your identity, you don't need to call me Sage anymore. Just call me Brother Zhou." Wonkin seemed to be a little uncomfortable. After hesitating for a while, he finally said, Brother Zhou, let's go in." I nodded and pushed open a heavy door with complicated carvings. The door seemed to have good soundproofing. At first, it was quiet, but when I pushed open the door, a wave of sound hit my face. I looked up and saw a spacious hall behind the door. It was decorated in an antique style, and there were rows of red-painted pillars around it. In the middle of the hall, short and exquisite long tables were placed in a regular pattern. There were dozens of them. At this moment, people were sitting cross-legged at each table. They were eating and talking. Many of them even stood up to talk to the people at the other tables. They were the ones who had made the loud sound in the hall. I sensed their cultivation base and found it strange. Except for a few people who had the aura of a heavenly master, most of them were below the heavenly master realm. How could the cultivation base of those people from the blessed enclave be so low? At this moment, Wong Can whispered to me, "Those are the servants and attendants from the blessed enclave. Sage, Brother Zhou, don't mind them. Let's go to the inner room. The people from the blessed enclave are waiting there." I understood now. No wonder those people in the hall didn't have a high cultivation base and looked young. They were just attendants. Speaking of attendants, those people's cultivation base wasn't low. Half of them had the heavenly master realm, and the rest had the glorious knowledge realm. In the secular world, they were a powerful force. The most frightening thing about the so-called blessed enclave wasn't the heavenly masters or the young god celestial masters, but the servants and attendants. The glorious knowledge realm was a very high cultivation base in the secular world, but it was ordinary in this place. It was because of their strong foundation that their overall strength was so terrifying. I nodded and glanced around before walking in. As soon as we entered the room, those people seemed to hear us. They all turned around and looked at me and Wong Can. Since our statuses were different, Wong Can didn't pay attention to those people. He didn't even look at them. He just took me past them and went to the other side of the hall. There was also a huge wooden door carved with complicated patterns. Since I had to hide my identity, I was just a foreign officer of the Wong family, so it wasn't appropriate for me to walk in front of Wong Can. This time, Wong Can walked in front of me. After pushing the door open, he walked in first, and I followed behind him. Just like in the hall outside, there were also some short tables placed here, only divided into 2 rows. The people inside sat at each table, and there were also people chatting, but because there were fewer people inside, it was not as noisy as outside. After we walked in, we also attracted everyone's attention. However, most of their eyes were focused on Wong Can, and no one paid attention to me. I followed behind him. While walking forward, I observed the people from the other paradises and blessed lands. Among those people, some were wearing old-fashioned cotton shirts, some were wearing suits and ties, and some were dressed casually. However, most of them were wearing Taoist robes like Wang Can. Since the Heavenly Dipper 9 steps contained the bright insight technique, I could easily see other people's cultivation base. He scanned the surroundings roughly. Among the people he saw, there were rarely any ordinary heavenly masters. Most of them were young spirit experts. Chapter 571. Officer Wang's face didn't change. Apparently, he was used to this. While walking forward, he whispered to me, "These are the representatives from the other paradises. Only 2 of the 10 major paradises are here, and most of them are from the 36 minor paradises and the 72 paradises." Following his introduction, we came to the center of the room. There was a short table, which was separate from the other 2 rows of short tables. Apparently, it was the main seat reserved for the Wangwu paradise. Someone was sitting at the table. He was tall and wore a gray robe. He was Ah Fu, who I had known for a while. Although he was a servant, his young god celestial master cultivation base gave him the qualification to represent the Wang family at this banquet. Before we arrived, he was the one who had been entertaining the guests. When Ah Fu saw me, he stood up and was about to salute me. I shook my head at him, took 2 steps forward, and sat next to him. After I sat down, Ah Fu understood what I meant and didn't say anything. Officer Wang picked up a glass of wine from the table and said to the crowd, "Today's banquet is to welcome all of my fellow Taoists. Please raise your glasses and drink with me. After that, the banquet will begin. I hope you can forgive us if we haven't received you well." Then, he picked up his glass and drained it in one gulp. After the others also drank, he smiled and apologized. Then he sat next to me. After we were all seated, a young man in a suit and gold-rimmed glasses came over with a glass of wine. I followed the voice and saw that the man was wearing a neat suit. He had a square face and a warm expression. He didn't look like a cultivator, but a business elite from a multinational company. However, he had the cultivation base of a heavenly master, which scared me. He smiled and chatted with Officer Wang for a while. Then, he turned to me and asked Officer Wang, "Brother Wang, this fellow Taoist looks unfamiliar. May I know who he is?" "This is Mr. Zhou, the Wang family's foreign advisor." Officer Wang introduced him. Then he pointed at the man and said to me, "This is Jiang Ziwen, Brother Jiang. He is the young master of the Heavenly Eye Paradise. The Heaven Eye Grotto Heaven is located in Suhang and is very close to the mortal world. They often have business dealings with each other. When it comes to making money, the Heaven Eye Grotto Heaven is undoubtedly the #1 grotto heaven. Timu Paradise should be one of the 36 lesser paradises. In terms of status, it was a notch lower than Wangwu Paradise. However, the man in the suit did not seem to have much respect for Officer Wang. After listening to the introduction of both sides, he was obviously a little dissatisfied. When he was about to say something, a slightly shrill voice next to him interrupted, "Hey, when did such a person appear in your Wangwu cave?" "Mr. Zhou, he is just at the early stage of the Celestial Master Realm." "How dare he call himself Mr.?" I turned my head and saw a young man in a black Taoist robe. He was holding a quilt in his hand. He had a fair face and a pair of triangular eyes. He was looking at me and Wang, seeing us turn our heads. He didn't restrain himself and continued to tease us. "Wang Can, has your Wangwu wonderland fallen to such a state?" He deliberately spoke in a loud voice. When the people around him heard it, they immediately burst into laughter. I didn't care about his sarcasm, but my heart sank when I heard the laughter. It was obvious that the people who were laughing were those who didn't get along with Wangwu Cave. Wangwu Grotto Heaven ranked first among the 10 great grotto heavens, but because of the death of Wang Can's father, its strength was at its weakest at this time. It was like a baby holding a precious treasure in his hand. Anyone who saw it would want to snatch it. At the heavenly grand ritual, most of the blessed paradises would try to replace it. The young man in the black Taoist robe was just the first one to stand out. Officer Wang's face darkened. He coldly glanced at the young man and said, "Zhao Hao, you are just an ordinary celestial master. What qualifications do you have to say that?" "Ordinary celestial master?" Zhao Hao laughed with a hint of sarcasm on his face. Officer Wong, you just became a celestial master a few days ago. How dare you talk to me like that? After saying that, Zhao Hao's eyes narrowed. He opened his mouth and spat out a white gas. In the white gas, a cold light flashed, and a crystal-clear white jade Dao sword appeared. It floated 1 foot in front of him. Even though it was far away from me, I could still feel a surging sword essence. A sword cultivator. When I saw the white jade Dao sword, I instantly recalled the old Taoist, Huangzhu, and Mo's background that Officer Wong had told me about. Could this Zhao Hao be a member of Xuanda Cave? While I was shocked, Officer Wong's face changed greatly. He stared at the white jade Dao sword and said in shock, refining the sword like jade, "You have reached the celestial master realm." Zhao Hao smiled proudly. He squinted at Officer Wong and said proudly, "I'm just a celestial master realm expert. If it weren't for this heavenly grand ritual, I would have already condensed the sword way, true spirit, and achieved the yang spirit. I don't know who your Wangwu cave will send this time. Officer Wong, I advise you not to fight this time. Otherwise, my Dao sword will not show any mercy." Hearing his blatant threat, Officer Wong's face suddenly became more unsightly. He had just entered the Celestial Master Realm, and Zhao Hao's cultivation of the Celestial Master Realm was not a lie, regardless of whether he could advance to the Yang Spirit at any time. In addition, he was a sword cultivator whose combat power was far superior to that of ordinary people. If they fought, Officer Wong's chance of winning was almost zero. Although cultivation was not the only thing that mattered in the arena, and talismans and magic treasures were all available, as people from the Blessed Enclave, no one lacked talismans or magic treasures. The huge gap in cultivation was the most fatal. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little awkward, a strong man sitting on the side tried to smooth things over. "That's enough. We haven't seen each other for a long time. Don't quarrel as soon as we meet. Don't talk so much." Zhao Hao looked a little unforgiving, but when he heard the strong man's words, he curled his lips and angrily put the Dao sword back into his body. I looked up at the strong man who had spoken. I could feel the terrible fluctuations of Dao Qi in his body, but I couldn't see through his cultivation. Obviously, this strong man was a Yang Spirit celestial master whose cultivation was far superior to mine. I curiously asked Officer Wong in a low voice, "Who is this person?" "He is the master of the mysterious treasure enclave. His name is Huangfu Xiao, and he is of the same generation as my father. We all call him Uncle Xiao." Officer Wong took a deep breath to suppress the anger in his heart. He slowly explained to me, "This person's cultivation is very high. Among all the Yang Spirit Celestial Masters in the Blessed Enclave, he is also one of the top. However, the entire Mysterious Treasure Enclave has withered. Except for him, there's not even an ordinary Celestial Master. There is a rumor that he alone obtained the Mysterious Treasure Enclave's fate for 100 years. Because of this, the Mysterious Treasure Enclave usually doesn't care about the ranking. This time, they just came to watch the heavenly grand ritual. He alone obtained the Mysterious Treasure Enclave's fate for 100 years. Although I couldn't see through his cultivation, I could vaguely feel that this person was even more terrifying than the Yang Spirit Celestial Masters that I had seen in the secular world. However, his name was interesting. Huangfu Xiao. Looking at his 2-meter-tall, sturdy body, I couldn't understand why he had such a delicate name. At that moment, Huangfu Xiao looked at Zhao Hao and said, "Although this time, the heavenly grand ritual will rearrange the ranking in the arena, the most important thing is that the Blessed Enclave is offering sacrifices to the heavens. Do not put the cart before the horse. If the Mysterious Virtue Enclave has other intentions, wait until the arena to compete." I was originally suspicious of Zhao Hao. After hearing this, I suddenly turned my head and asked Officer Wong, "That Zhao Hao is from the Mysterious Virtue Enclave?" Officer Wong nodded and said somewhat dispiritedly, "That's right, it's them. Back then, we took an oath not only because we were kind, but also because we wanted to suppress the Mysterious Virtue Enclave's power. Although the Mysterious Virtue Enclave is only one of the 36 minor enclaves, it is ranked first. It can be promoted to the top 10 enclaves at any time. However, our Wangwu enclave has been going downhill for the past few years. Their goal this time is to replace us and enter the top 10 enclaves. I nodded as I understood what he meant. The position of the Blessed Enclave's chief wasn't just an empty title. Officer Wang definitely wanted to fight for it. However, the power of the Wangwu Enclave had been declining. It was very unlikely that they would be able to keep their chief position. On the other side, Zhao Hao had calmed down and looked at Officer Wang and me. But at this moment, one of the servants behind him suddenly moved closer and whispered something into his ear. After Zhao Hao heard it, his eyes widened. His triangular eyes emitted an ominous glint as he glared fiercely at me. Chapter 572. Perhaps it was because he saw the coldness in my eyes. Zhao Hao's face flashed with anger. He stood up and walked towards me. When he was in front of me, his eyes were fierce. He asked me fiercely, "Boy, I heard that you want to steal something from my Schwanda Wonderland." I was stunned at first, but then I realized that he was talking about IMO. I had just seen IMO, and Zhao Hao already knew about it. It was obvious that Schwanda Wonderland had planted a spy in Wangwu Wonderland. Although the Wonderlands belonged to the same faction, they had deep conflicts with each other. They kept hindering each other openly and secretly. It was normal for spies to be planted. At this time, the hostile relationship between Wangwu Wonderland and Schwanda Wonderland was obvious. Therefore, I didn't have any good ancient books. I sneered and said, "Yours? If I like something, it naturally belongs to me. What does it have to do with your Schwanda Wonderland?" Zhao Hao was furious. He sneered and said, "Boy, let me tell you, there are more than 100 Wonderlands, but only my Schwanda Wonderland is a sword cultivator. The natural sword embryo belongs to my Schwanda Wonderland. Even when Jinren Wang was alive, he didn't dare to take it away. It really was about IMO." I sighed in my heart. My hatred for Schwanda Wonderland deepened. However, the Jinren Wang he mentioned should be Officer Wang's father. According to Officer Wang, his father was a perfected immortal. Even Officer Wang's father didn't dare to take IMO away. What did he mean? Could it be that Schwanda Wonderland had some amazing means that could even keep a perfected immortal in check? Although I didn't understand the details, Mo's matter was too cruel. As long as there was a chance, I didn't want to let Zhao Hao have his way. I looked at him coldly and said in a deep voice, "The natural sword embryo you mentioned is a living person. I won't take it away, but with me around, don't even think about it." Zhao Hao sneered and said disdainfully, "It's something that even the Wang family can't stop. Do you think you can?" Of course, I couldn't do it alone. Not to mention Schwanda Wonderland's background, I might not even be a match for Zhao Hao at the Yang Spirit Realm. However, Officer Wang obeyed me. As long as I gave the order, Wangwu Wonderland would naturally protect IMO. Although Schwanda Wonderland was strong, Wangwu Wonderland had existed for thousands of years, so it wasn't easy to deal with them. It wouldn't be difficult for them to protect IMO. Without waiting for me to say anything, Zhao Hao stood up and gave me a sinister smile. "Looking at your cultivation, you should have been invited by the Wang family to participate in the All-Heaven Grand Competition, right? Fine, I'll remember you. You'd better pray that you don't meet me in the arena." Hao's words, Zhao of, and said, Wang, and said, Wang Zhao Hao was, officer. And Huang, even Huang Fuxiu, who had scolded Zhao Hao earlier, was playing with the wine glass in her hand in silence for some reason. After a moment of silence, I turned to Officer Wang and asked, "Zhao Hao said that only Schwanda Wonderland has sword cultivators. What does that mean? Also, are the other grotto heavens and blessed lands indifferent to little Mo's matter?" Officer Wang sighed and kept silent for a while. He looked ashamed and helpless. Mo's matter. It's hard to explain. His parents, and his ancestors were actually pregnant sword slaves raised by the Schwanda Grotto Heaven. Those slaves cultivate with swords for generations. It's okay if they're not talented, but if they're talented, they'll be refined into sword slaves, just like IMO and his parents. In the eyes of the other Wonderlands, it's just a family matter of Schwanda Wonderland. Naturally, no one will interfere. I was shocked. Now I understood why Officer Wong looked guilty. No wonder he didn't tell me the truth. IMO and his parents were Schwanda Wonderland slaves, just like Afu and Asho. Those Wonderlands have been passed down for thousands of years. No one could guarantee that there would be experts in every generation. That was why they had to keep slaves. Even if their descendants weren't good enough, they would still have loyal servants to protect them. That way, their families wouldn't be destroyed. As for Schwanda Wonderland, it was just that their methods were crueler. It was no wonder that all the other Wonderlands kept silent about this matter. They were all jackals of the same tribe. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. When I opened my eyes again, they were clear again. I had temporarily put aside my extreme thoughts. Schwanda Wonderland was different after all. Even if the other Wonderlands kept slaves, they still treated them as human beings. For example, Officer Wong treated Afu and the others. Although he called them master and servant, he still treated them politely. It was just like the relationship between a landlord and a tenant farmer in ancient times, or the relationship between a boss and an employee. However, Schwanda Wonderland refined people into sword slaves without intelligence. It was different in nature. At this moment, the atmosphere of the banquet was warm again. Officer Wong quickly adjusted his mood. He wore a faint smile on his face, which made people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. After receiving the guests who came to toast him, he excused himself to me. Then, he raised his glass and walked to the other tables. No matter what, he was the host, and he had to show his hospitality. I had nothing to do, and I didn't know anyone else. Of course, I didn't want to raise my glass. I simply focused on the dishes in front of me. I didn't know where Officer Wong had found a chef. The dishes in front of me looked exquisite, and they tasted great. I was used to eating delicacies at Wang Yongjun's place. After eating a few times, I felt my appetite was piqued. I guess the ingredients of the dishes in front of me were grown in this wonderland. They contained spiritual energy, which was why even ordinary dishes had flavors that I had never seen in the secular world. Besides the dishes, the wine in the porcelain bottle on the table wasn't ordinary either. After I was full, I took out the small ball I had just taken out from the Yin and Yang Rui vase. I played with it while I poured myself a glass of wine, waiting for the end of the banquet. Soon, I finished the bottle of wine. I smacked my lips and wanted more. I was about to call the waiter next to me to pour more wine. However, before I could open my mouth, I saw a milky white wine bottle in front of me. I lifted my head and saw a boy around Mo's age standing by the table. He was the one who had placed the wine bottle on the table. I was a little surprised. This boy didn't look like a waiter here, be it his clothes or his age. Was he a member of the family that the person from the Wonderland had brought here? I smiled at him and asked, "Little friend, which family are you from?" The boy frowned and put down the wine bottle. He clasped his hands behind his back and answered, "I'm from the mysterious treasure Wonderland." His voice was crisp and tender, but his words were full of vicissitudes of life. I couldn't help but be startled by the way he addressed himself. The wine cup that was about to be brought to my mouth also stopped. The boy seemed to be used to my surprised expression. He poured himself a cup of wine and slowly drank a mouthful before sitting down on the empty seat beside me. Then he said in an old voice, "I made some mistakes in my cultivation years ago. My body and appearance are a little strange. Taoist friend, you don't have to be surprised." I was a little suspicious at first, thinking that it was a child who was joking with me. However, after hearing his words, I was 80% convinced. There were many strange people in the world of metaphysics. It wasn't a big deal to maintain one's appearance forever in the mortal world. However, I found it strange that I couldn't see through the boy's cultivation after using my clear insight power. Could he be a young god, celestial master? I pondered in my heart, but my expression didn't change. I asked indifferently, "What business does Taoist friend have with me?" The childlike old man frowned and pointed at my left hand. He asked, "Where did the thing in Taoist friend's hand come from?" I lowered my head and saw that the thing in my left hand was the seed that I had taken from the Yin Yang Rui vase. After a moment of silence, as I didn't understand what this person meant, I didn't tell the truth and casually replied, "This is a small thing that I picked up earlier. I felt that it was a little strange, so I kept it with me." "Why? Does Taoist friend recognize this thing? You picked it up?" The boy frowned and asked, "Where did you pick it up? Tell me the specific location, and I can agree to one of your conditions." After hearing his words, I felt strange and didn't know how to reply. While I was silent, Huang Fuxiu, who I had seen before, suddenly walked over. After seeing the boy, she respectfully bowed and asked, "Martial uncle, why are you here?" "I saw an interesting little thing." The boy sighed. Then he turned to look at me and said, "I don't mind telling you that this thing is a seed that can grow into an ancient tree. The wood is an excellent material for making magic tools, but the method is very complicated. It won't be of much help to you. You might as well tell me the origin of this seed in exchange for some benefits." After saying that, the boy pondered for a moment and said, "Didn't that boy from Schwanda, Wonderland, want to harm you? I'll give you a magic tool so that you can compete with him." I was stunned. I had only suspected it before, but when Huang Fuxiu called him martial uncle, I was sure that the boy's cultivation was very high. The reason why there was no fluctuation of Tao energy was that I couldn't see it. Seeing that I didn't speak, Huang Fuxiu frowned and said to me, "My martial uncle always keeps his word. If you don't believe me, I can guarantee it." I remained silent. It wasn't that I doubted Huang Fuxiu's credibility, but I was hesitant. I didn't know the origin of this thing. Moreover, I got it from the place where Wang Can's father cultivated. I didn't know if there were any secrets. Before I figured it out, I definitely couldn't tell this boy. Before I could think of a reason to reject him, the boy seemed to see my hesitation. He sighed and said in an old-fashioned tone, "Think about it carefully. I won't leave before the heavenly grand ritual is completed. When you've thought it through, you can find me. With your current cultivation, you won't be able to last long against that boy from Schwanda Wonderland. You have to think it through." After saying that, he turned to leave with Huang Fuxiu. I was stunned and asked, "How should I address you, senior?" Chapter 573. Song Feng. This old man's name is interesting. I looked at his back and thought to myself. At this moment, Officer Wang returned from toasting at another table. He followed my gaze and saw the child. His face changed as he blurted out, "That old monster! Why is he here? Sage, are you all right?" He was flustered, and he didn't even care how he addressed me. I shook my head. "I'm fine. Is that child really an old man?" Officer Wang heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that I was all right. He nodded and said, "Yes, this man is very famous in the Blessed Enclave. I heard that he has lived for more than 200 years. We all secretly call him an old monster." More than 200 years old. I was surprised. Although cultivators could live longer than ordinary people, it was too exaggerated to say that a cultivator was more than 200 years old. It wasn't difficult for cultivators to obtain great power, but their lifespan was determined by fate. Since ancient times, very few people could go against the heavens and escape from the pursuit of the underworld. Officer Wang continued, "I've heard my father talk about him. He came from a mysterious wonderland, and his real name wasn't Song Feng. At that time, the Kunlun Mountain's earth dragon was rolling, and a crack appeared on the top of the mountain, revealing two swords. One of them was called Song Feng, and the other was called Unsheathing. It caused many people in the Blessed Enclave to fight for it. At that time, he won the Song Feng sword and became famous in the Blessed Enclave. Later, he seemed to be crazy about swords, so he changed his name to Song Feng. I thought his name was strange, but it turned out that he was named after a sword. It was interesting. I asked, what about the unsheathing sword? Did anyone get it? Officer Wang nodded. The one who got the unsheathing sword was his brother. My father told me that his brother's cultivation base was higher than his. When they were fighting for the two swords, thanks to his brother's help, they each got one. At that time, the two of them held the Song Feng sword and the unsheathing sword, and they were brothers. When they were in the heavenly master realm, they could suppress the young god celestial master. Later, when they became young gods, they became even more powerful. For decades, almost no one could compete with them. Fortunately, the mysterious Wonderland never wanted to compete. Otherwise, our Wanwu Wonderland wouldn't have been able to keep its position as the top heavenly abode. So powerful. I was startled. I had guessed that the old man was a Yang, God Heavenly Master, but according to Officer Wong, I was afraid this old man, named Song Feng's cultivation base, wasn't just at the Yang God level. Yeah, Wonkin nodded with some emotion. There was a trace of fascination in his eyes. According to my father, no one in the Blessed Enclave dared to provoke these two brothers at that time. But later, they fought among themselves. They're fighting. I couldn't help but smile. Didn't you say that the brothers are connected? Why are they fighting? I don't know. I heard that it was because of a woman. Officer Wong shook his head. Apparently, he only knew a little about that history. He continued, after the fight between the two brothers, the elder brother died, and the hidden edge sword disappeared for 100 years. When he reappeared, he looked like a child now. There is a popular saying that his body was destroyed in the war, and only his remnant soul survived with the hidden edge sword in his hand. His childlike body was also transformed by the hidden edge sword. Apart from that, his cultivation has completely disappeared. His cultivation disappeared? I couldn't help but feel embarrassed. I couldn't see through the child's cultivation base, so I thought that he was much stronger than me. It turned out that his cultivation base had disappeared. But if he didn't have any cultivation base, how could he have survived for so many years with the magical sword in his hand? I pondered for a long time, but I couldn't figure it out. At this moment, someone came over to propose a toast. Officer Wong greeted him with a smile and chatted with his family. I continued to drink as I turned my head to look at the mysterious treasure, Wonderland, from the corner of my eye. At this moment, the hidden edge sword was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. His hands were on his knees, and he seemed to be meditating. Huang Fuxiu, who was famous in the Blessed Enclave, knelt next to him with a distressed face. She looked helpless and said something carefully. I started to think about what Hidden Edge had said. He said that as long as I told him the origin of the seed, he would give me a magic tool that could help me fight against Zhao Hao. Zhao Hao was a real seal celestial master at the Great Perfection Celestial Master Realm, and he was a sword cultivator. He didn't lack talismans or magic treasures. Among the celestial masters at the Great Perfection Celestial Master Realm, he was one of the best. He could even fight against the Yang God Celestial Master. With my current cultivation base, I didn't have much chance of winning if I fought against him. Moreover, my cultivation base was different from others. The old man only saw that I was at the early stage of the Celestial Master Realm. Even so, he still had the confidence to let me fight against Zhao Hao. From this, it could be seen that the magic tool he promised me was very powerful. Although the old man had lost his cultivation base, I didn't know why, but I believed what he said. After all, he was a legendary figure, so there was no need for him to lie to me. In fact, my real combat power was much higher than the early stage of the Celestial Master Realm. With my real strength and the magic tool he promised me, it shouldn't be a problem for me to defeat Zhao Hao. So, the question now was, should I exchange the vase for a magic tool? Exchanging an unknown vase for a magic tool that could defeat a celestial master at the Great Perfection Celestial Master Realm was not a bad deal. After a moment of silence, Officer Wong had finished chatting. I stopped him and asked, Officer Wong, the small building I'm staying in is the place where the ancestors of the Wong family have been practicing for a long time. Did your father leave all the things in there? Officer Wong nodded. Yes, after my father passed away, I never touched the things in there. I thought for a moment and asked, when your father passed away, did he tell you what extraordinary things he left behind? Officer Wong was puzzled by my question. He frowned and said, Our Wong family has been passed down for 2,000 years, and we have many magic tools and treasures. My father told me about them. As for the things in the small building, he never mentioned them to me. They shouldn't be anything rare. In that case, Officer Wong didn't know about the vase. I thought about it and decided that I didn't need to hide the relationship between Officer Wong and me. I directly mentioned the vase and described it to Officer Wong. Then, I asked him, this vase is also called the Yin and Yang Rui vase. Since it was left by your father, the things inside must have been sealed by your father. Why didn't he tell you anything? Did he forget about it? Officer Wong shook his head. After thinking for a while, he said, I don't know if my father forgot about it or not. However, our Wong family is the Holy Spirit guard of the sage. If the sage wants to study the Wong family's things, he can take them. I thought I could get some useful information from Officer Wong, but he didn't know anything about it. Now, I couldn't make up my mind. While playing with the seed in my hand, my mind was racing. From Song Feng's attitude, there was no doubt that he wanted to get this seed. At least, it proved that the Yin and Yang Rui vase was extraordinary. Its value shouldn't be less than the magical tool he had promised me. He was an old monster that had lived for more than 200 years. He wouldn't do anything that would make him lose money. Could it be that this Yin and Yang Rui vase was of the highest quality and could seal living people? I couldn't help but recall Officer Wong's words. Song Feng's body had been destroyed, and his soul was born from the hidden edge sword. Thinking of this, my mind flickered, and I vaguely got a clue. In that case, I couldn't exchange this vase with him easily. But if I don't exchange it, first of all, I am not knowledgeable enough to know the true value of this bottle. Second, Zhao Hao is indeed a big problem. This time, Officer Wong specially invited me to the Wong family because of the competition at the Heavenly Grand Ritual. I must represent the Wong family and fight with Zhao Hao. Although I have many trump cards, I don't dare to say that I can defeat Zhao Hao. At this time, if I can obtain a powerful magical artifact, it will be very beneficial for me. I hesitated again. After thinking for a while, I made up my mind. For the time being, I wouldn't consider whether I should exchange it or not. I needed to go to Song Feng's place and find out the true value of this Yin and Yang Rui vase. Then, I would make a decision. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.